Chapter 1. On Green Peak Mountain, clouds and mist lingered. A large hall at the top of the mountain was simple and spacious. About 100 or so green-robed shoujo stood in the hall, adding a bit of immortal aura to this simple hall. Meng-Chi stood quietly at the back of the shoujo. She wore the same green robe as the others, a dark green belt wrapped around her slender waist. Her long black hair was tied behind her head, held up by a simple hairpin. There was no makeup on her clean and white face. Other than the faint scent of medicine, there was no other presence on her body. Meng-Shamai, do you know what happened? The young girl standing to the left of Meng-Chi, the Shijie Lan Zhuxian who had entered the sect half a year earlier than her, asked softly, "Why have we all been summoned to the hall?" "I don't know." Meng-Chi responded faintly. Her right hand clasped a small bamboo scroll. After answering the Shijie's question, she closed her eyes again, completely immersed in the world recorded on the bamboo scroll, completely forgetting herself. The young girl who asked the question, Lan Zhuxian, curled her lips. Clearwind Valley was just an inconspicuous small sect among the 3,000 world's shoujo sects. The sect's disciples were basically all lianqi shoujo. Zhuji was rarely seen. Only the two elders and the sect leader had successfully formed their core. However, Clearwind Valley was a medical sect and never lacked disciples. However, most of the disciples who came here were of average talent. Some were even unable to break through in lianqi for 10 years. Basically, they all wanted to learn some medical skills so they could survive in these 3,000 worlds. "Look." Meng-Chi heard her Shijie whispering to another person, "Meng-Chi Shamai is always so hardworking." Meng-Chi didn't even open her eyes. The dark yellow bamboo scroll in her hand glowed. Even the hand she held the bamboo scroll with seemed to be plated with a layer of soft light. After a long while, she slowly opened her eyes. That layer of faint light flashed across her black and white eyes, finally disappearing. Although Lan Zhuxian didn't speak again, she was still paying attention to her. She watched the light on the bamboo scroll dim, her gaze complicated. "Meng-Shamai, you even learned this second-grade spell?" This was already the most powerful technique that an ordinary disciple of the Cool Breeze Valley could obtain. Meng-Shamai had only entered the school for half a year. Although she was also a little qi refining stage cultivator, her medical skills had progressed at lightning speed, leaving her far behind. Lan Zhuxian looked at Meng-Chi's handsome side profile with some envy and jealousy. "You are really amazing. No wonder Elder Yang said that your talent in medical skills is second only to junior sister Lu Qingran." Elder Yang was one of the only two elders in Cool Breeze Valley who had successfully formed their gold core. Hearing the name Lu Qingran, Meng-Chi's eyes flickered slightly. There was finally a ripple in her cold and indifferent expression. She didn't have time to think about it. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the entrance of the hall. The disciples of Cool Breeze Valley in the hall all turned their heads to look at the door. A handsome young man in a black robe was holding an unconscious young girl tightly in his arms as he walked into the hall step by step. Lan Zhuxian's eyes widened subconsciously. Isn't that? There was a small hubbub around Meng-Chi. Like Lan Zhuxian, everyone's attention was attracted by the young man in the black robe. He was very good-looking. There were countless cultivators in the 3,000 worlds, and there was never a lack of beauties. However, it was rare for the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley to see such a handsome young man who seemed to be doted on by the gods. What's more, this person look at the symbol on his robe. He is from Burning Sky Palace. Burning Sky Palace? Is it the Burning Sky Palace that can enter the top 10 in our eastern border? Is there a second Burning Sky Palace? Then this person is Chu Tianfeng, the young master of Burning Sky Palace. The young master of Burning Sky Palace who succeeded in foundation establishment at the age of 13, formed his gold core at the age of 22, and is now at the third level of gold core at the age of 24. I heard that even in the entire 3,000 worlds, he is a young genius whose cultivation speed can be ranked in the top 100. He is also the young master of Burning Sky Palace. And he is so good-looking. But his face is so pale. Of course, he is still very handsome. Hey! Is he carrying junior sister Lu Qingran? The hall quieted down. All the disciples' gazes fell on the black-clothed young man. The 3,000 worlds were divided into the East, West, South, and North realms. Under each realm, there were countless small worlds and sects. Cool Breeze Valley belonged to the eastern border. It was a super small sect that couldn't be ranked among the countless sects here. And Burning Sky Palace was a large sect that could be ranked in the top 10. The young master of Burning Sky Palace was no different from a banished immortal to the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley, who were all in chi refinement. In any case, they were all high and mighty, and they wouldn't have any interactions even in their dreams. But now, this person was carrying a disciple of Cool Breeze Valley and slowly walking into the hall. Countless envious and jealous gazes instantly fell on the face of the girl in the black-clothed young man's arms. Meng Qi withdrew her gaze, her heart as still as water. Senior sister Lan Zhuxian, who was standing beside her, excitedly reached out and grabbed her arm. Junior sister Meng, did you see? Junior sister Lu was actually carried back by the young master of Burning Sky Palace. She was so excited that she was a little incoherent. So romantic. Meng Qi raised her eyes, her gaze still calm. She calmly reminded Lan Zhuxian, senior sister Lu Qingran seems to be unconscious. The Cool Breeze Valley sect master had already flown over to greet them. Her most valued personal disciple was unconscious and was carried back to the sect by a strange young man. Even if she had received the other party's message in advance, the sect master's expression still didn't look good. She was about to take Lu Qingran when her gaze swept over the young man's face. Her eyes suddenly widened. Cool Breeze Valley was a medical cultivation sect. The sect master was also the person with the highest cultivation and medical skills in the sect. The young master of Burning Sky Palace, Chu Tianfeng, the black-clothed young man who carried her disciple back, had black lines in his eyes. This was clearly, he had been poisoned by a very powerful poison. The sect master's gaze flickered. After a while, she sighed softly and slowly took her personal disciple back. Chu Tianfeng, who had been standing ramrod straight just a moment ago, suddenly staggered. He seemed to have used all his strength to barely regain his footing. However, that incomparably handsome face looked even paler. Meng Qi's heart moved slightly. Countless familiar images flashed through her mind in an instant, the unconscious senior sister Lu Qingran and the handsome black-clothed young man Chu Tianfeng who carried her back to the sect. The young man's wound was contaminated with a highly toxic demonic aura. As the high and mighty young palace master of Burning Sky Palace, he could only accept the powerlessness of having his realm sealed. And he had to endure the pain of being pierced by tens of thousands of needles every hour. Meng Qi tilted her head slightly, her gaze falling on the still unconscious senior sister Lu Qingran and her pale little face. She, who had been reborn, couldn't be more clear. Senior sister Lu was truly favored by the heavens. She was a koi, the child of destiny. No matter what happened, there would always be all kinds of powerful male cultivators around her who would appear in time to help her out in time. For example, this time, Lu Qingran had been protected by Chu Tianfeng from beginning to end. Her wound wasn't serious at all. Rather than being unconscious due to injury, it was better to say that she was unconscious due to great fright. But it was Chu Tianfeng. Meng Qi looked at the black-clothed youth whose face was even paler. He was a Jindan Shouja. Normal poisons couldn't even think about hurting him. But the demonic poison he was afflicted with right now came from a 5th-grade demonic beast of the Mo world. Shouja started from Lianqi, Zhuji, Jindan, Yuanying, and then Fangshan. This corresponded to 5th-grade demonic beasts. This was equivalent to a Fangshan Shouja who was 2 whole realms higher than Chu Tianfeng, giving him a hard blow. So from the moment Chu Tianfeng was poisoned, he had to endure the pain of tens of thousands of needles piercing his bones day and night. It would flare up every hour, making him wish he was dead. The sect leader of Clearwind Valley had already handed Lu Qingran to a female disciple to continue holding. Her finger tapped lightly and quickly checked the poison on Chu Tianfeng's body. The sect leader's expression became even uglier. She was just a Jindan 7th realm Shouja. Her medical skills were only 3rd grade and had yet to reach perfection. She really was helpless against this kind of poison. Fellow Daoist Chu may only be able to find someone to treat him after returning to Burning Heaven Palace. The sect leader sighed softly. If possible, she was willing to cure Chu Tianfeng. If a small sect like Clear Wind Valley could be on good terms with Burning Heaven Palace, there would be many benefits in the future. Chu Tianfeng did not speak. His thin lips were pressed together, clearly using all his power to resist the poison in his body. Large beads of sweat slid down the side of his handsome face. His black robes were instantly soaked with sweat. Meng Qi stood behind the crowd and looked at Chu Tianfeng from afar. The proud youth would not allow himself to show weakness in front of others. But right now, he couldn't go back to Burning Heaven Palace for help. The 3,000 realms were mainly inhabited by human Shouja. Very large. From Clear Wind Valley to Burning Heaven Palace, there were mountains and seas in between. Even when Chu Tianfeng was unharmed, using the transportation formations between the small realms, it would take about 10 days to return. Moreover, the journey was not safe. The 3,000 realms were too big, and there were often demons and strange beasts in the wild and deep mountains. Chu Tianfeng was now severely injured and poisoned, so he could not fly at all. His realm was also suppressed to qi refinement. And, Meng Qi recalled carefully. She remembered that Chu Tianfeng had almost used up all his life-saving magic treasures in order to escape from the hands of the 5th-grade demon with senior Lu Qingran. In the end, his storage bag was destroyed by the demon. In his current situation, there was absolutely no way for him to contact Burning Heaven Palace. Meng Qi lowered her eyes and stood quietly in the crowd. The reason why she remembered it so clearly was that she had experienced the same scene before her rebirth. At that time, she had just entered Clear Wind Valley for half a year. As an ordinary disciple of the sect, she cultivated hard every day. When Chu Tianfeng came back with Lu Qingran, he was also injured and poisoned and could not contact Burning Heaven Palace. The entire Cool Breeze Valley, from top to bottom, was completely powerless against the poison that he had been afflicted with. Meng Qi was still very naive at that time. She decided to become a medical cultivator because she liked medical skills. Every day, in addition to the normal cultivation that every cultivator needed, she would study all kinds of medical skills in the sect's library. All the skills in the 3,000 realms were divided into 9 grades. Above the 9 grades were the 3 major realms of heaven, earth, and profound. Medical skills were no exception. Meng Qi was indeed very talented in medical skills. After entering the sect for half a year, her cultivation realm progress was slow. However, her medical skills were already at the peak of the 2nd grade. She only needed an opportunity to break through and enter the threshold of the 3rd grade. She was almost on par with the elders in the sect. It was not easy to cultivate medical skills, far more difficult than normal cultivation. In addition to learning all kinds of medical skills, she also needed to increase her proficiency by truly saving patients through refining medicine. Only when her proficiency was at the peak could she break through to the next realm. Meng Qi was obsessed with medical skills. At that time, she looked at the people in the sect sighing and the black-clothed youth enduring the pain of thousands of needles piercing his bones. So she stepped forward. After 10 days and 10 nights without sleep, she finally found a way to cure Chu Tianfeng's poison. Unfortunately, a strange look flashed through Meng Qi's eyes. Her clear and cold gaze fell on Shujie Lu Qingran's beautiful face. Only after being reborn did she understand that Shujie Lu Qingran was the one favored by the heavens. She was destined to be doted on and made countless male cultivators crazy for her. Anyone who made her feel threatened was destined to have a miserable end. Meng Qi tilted her head slightly. At that time, she spent 10 days and 10 nights to finally cure Chu Tianfeng's poison and heal his injuries. Before she could rejoice that her medical skills had finally broken through, she fainted from exhaustion. By the time Meng Qi woke up, it was already the next day. She was not lying in her little room, but was locked up in the dungeon of Cool Breeze Valley. The dungeon had restrictions set up by the sect leader and elders. Meng Qi, as a little cultivator who was still in the Lianqi stage at that time, could not go out. She only found out later. Lu Qingran had also woken up. After she woke up, the first thing she did was to tell the sect leader and Chu Tianfeng that she had seen a person wearing the uniform of a Cool Breeze Valley disciple with the demon that had injured Chu Tianfeng. The sect leader and elders discussed it. They felt that it was inconceivable that Meng Qi, as a little cultivator in the Lianqi stage, whose medical skills were only second grade at that time, could cure Chu Tianfeng. The only explanation was that she had colluded with the demon beforehand. Pretending to cure the poison was just to take the opportunity to get close to the young master of Burning Sky Palace. So they locked her up in the dungeon. She had worked so hard to save someone. Alright, even if she saved Chu Tianfeng at that time, it was for the sake of her own medical skills. But because of Shujie Lu Qingran's light words. There was no evidence, and they did not even ask her. Meng Qi stayed in the dungeon for 3 whole months. 3 months later, Meng Qi finally left the dungeon. At that time, she was still very angry. There was nothing in the dungeon, and it was also the place with the thinnest spiritual energy in the entire Cool Breeze Valley. Without medicinal herbs, she could not refine pills. There were no new spells for her to learn. She could not use her medical skills to save people. Whether it was Meng Qi's cultivation or medical skills, she had not improved in the past 3 months. What's more, she was indeed innocent. After leaving the dungeon, Meng Qi found out. On the night she was locked up in the dungeon, the demon realm broke through the barrier at the edge of the Trichilia chasm and attacked on a large scale. The people were plunged into misery and suffering, and the Cool Breeze Valley was almost destroyed. Later, thanks to Chu Tianfeng, who had already been saved by her, he stepped forward and turned the tide. He even brought in a super powerful reinforcements like Burning Sky Palace to save everyone in the Cool Breeze Valley. It was not that the sect leader did not investigate, but that they did not have the time to investigate. During that time, everyone in the Cool Breeze Valley was more or less injured. Only Meng Qi, who was in the dungeon in the heart of the valley, was fine. After that, the entire sect of Cool Breeze Valley merged into Burning Sky Palace and became one of the subordinate sects of Burning Sky Palace. This was not a small matter. There were too many things that the sect leader and the elders of the sect had to worry about. After everything was settled, the sect leader immediately sent people to investigate the matter of Meng Qi. Those who knew that she had been wronged immediately let her out. They also personally explained the reason to her. The sect leader trusted his personal disciple. But he still thought highly of Meng Qi, who was not lacking in medical skills. Cool Breeze Valley was not far from the edge of the boundary between the Trichilia chasm and the Yaomo. It was another small sect. They had always been cautious in their actions. Meng Qi thought about it. As a little Lianqi Xiu, it was a bit unbelievable that she had cured the poison of a 5th-grade demon that even Jindan Shouja could not. It was not completely without reason that the sect leader would suspect her. Not to mention that she knew now. They had not purposely locked her up for 3 months. Meng Qi had always been open-minded. She had indeed broken through to 3rd grade because she had cured Chu Tianfeng. She immediately smiled and threw this matter to the back of her mind. At that time, Lu Qingran had already become an honored guest of Burning Sky Palace. Everyone knew that the young master of Burning Sky Palace liked her. But it was not hard to understand. After all, a Zhuji Shouja could bravely stand in front of Chu Tianfeng in the face of a 5th-grade demon. No one would be able to resist liking this kind of girl. As for Meng Qi, probably even Chu Tianfeng had forgotten that the one who had stayed up all night to cure his poison and had almost been poisoned by the demon's aura was that little Shouja Meng Qi of Cool Breeze Valley. Meng Qi came back to her senses from her memories and quietly looked at Chu Tianfeng, who was still enduring the pain. Then what about now? Save him? Or not? When Meng Qi died in her previous life, she had barely succeeded in forming her core, and her medical skills were at the peak of 5th grade. In addition, with her previous experience, it should be much easier to save Chu Tianfeng now than in her previous life. But she was a little hesitant. The Trichilia chasm was never a safe place. Demons surrounded it, and strange beasts coveted it. There were also many conflicts between Shouja. After her rebirth, Meng Qi could have left Cool Breeze Valley. But she, who was only at the 7th realm of Qi refinement, could not protect herself in the Trichilia chasm. So she chose to stay and cultivate desperately. Because only by becoming strong enough could she survive in this world. Thinking about the great change that followed. It could be said that if Chu Tianfeng had not been cured at that time, recovered his cultivation, and brought reinforcements like Burning Sky Palace in time. It was very likely that the entire Cool Breeze Valley would have been destroyed. All the disciples were either captured by the demon realm as slaves or died without a complete corpse. Meng Qi saved Chu Tianfeng at that time, which was equivalent to saving herself. But Meng Qi thought of the words she heard in a trance before she died in her previous life. Your senior sister Lu Qingran has great luck and is favored by the heavens. Anyone who tried to steal her providence would suffer a backlash. What a pity, what a pity. Meng Qi did not know who spoke. She had pondered over these words repeatedly after her rebirth. Thinking back carefully, every time she was unlucky, even when she died in the end, it seemed to be related to Lu Qingran. To be precise, every time she could not help but save those men who were destined to admire senior sister Lu Qingran in the future. They would all be unlucky. Was this also taking away Lu Qingran's luck? Because she saved these people, they might be grateful to her. Sigh. Meng Qi was lost in thought when she suddenly heard Lan Zhuxian whisper beside her, "What?" She just fainted in front of the young master of Burning Sky Palace. She didn't do anything. She can get the gratitude of the young master of Burning Sky Palace in this way. This karma is really worth it. Meng Qi was a little absent-minded. She looked up. Chu Tianfeng had endured the pain of the poison for 2 hours. He was telling the sect master what had happened before. Chu Tianfeng focused on how Lu Qingran bravely stood in front of him. He talked about how he was injured and poisoned and how he escaped with Lu Qingran from the claws of a demon 2 realms higher than him. In the end, his gaze fell on the pale face of the girl who was still unconscious. His originally cold gaze seemed to soften. She understood. Meng Qi suddenly understood. Cultivators were most concerned about karma. The inner demons planted in the Qi refinement stage might become a tribulation when they ascended to the Mahayana stage in the future. So, she saved those men who had karma entangled with Lu Qingran and did not ask for anything in return. She was taking away senior sister Lu's luck. That was why she was unlucky. Then Meng Qi suddenly stepped out of the crowd. Chu Tianfeng must be saved. The small world where Cool Breeze Valley was located was at the eastern edge of the 3,000 worlds, bordering the demon world and the Yarrow world. The 5th-grade demon that injured Chu Tianfeng did not appear by chance. Without Chu Tianfeng, the entire Cool Breeze Valley would be finished. Meng Qi herself could not escape. However, she could cut off the karma between herself and Chu Tianfeng. The black-clothed youth's face was still pale. Only he had tasted the pain of 10,000 needles piercing his bones. Right now, his clothes were soaked with sweat. He had never been in such a sorry state. After being poisoned, his realm was suppressed. Right now, he was only equivalent to the Qi refinement stage. Probably half of the cultivators in Cool Breeze Valley could defeat him. As the young master of Burning Sky Palace, other than his extremely high cultivation talent, his vision was also extraordinary. He knew that there would be a fierce battle. If he could not recover as soon as possible. Probably, but in the entire Cool Breeze Valley, the most powerful sect master was only at the Jindan stage. Probably no one would be able to cure the poison in his body. Burning Sky Palace was also very far away from here. Even his storage bag had been destroyed by the demon, and he could not contact the sect for help. This time, he was probably really doomed. Of course, Chu Tianfeng would not mention his worries to the people of Cool Breeze Valley. Even the sect master of Cool Breeze Valley was not worthy of his attention. His gaze fell on Lu Qingran's face. He thought of the young girl fearlessly rushing in front of him, blocking between him and the 5th-grade demon. She was so scared that her face was pale, but she still gritted her teeth bravely. Chu Tianfeng's gaze became soft. Even if he had to risk his life, he would protect Lu Qingran. This brave young girl was really the most beautiful, kindest, most naive and pure girl he had ever met. I can cure the poison for you. At this moment, a clear and cold young girl's voice sounded beside Chu Tianfeng. The voice was a bit soft, and also a bit sweet. Chu Tianfeng turned his head and saw the green-robed Meng Qi walk out of the crowd. Achem. He frowned as he looked at Meng Qi, who was obviously only at the Qi disciple stage. Who was this person? Did she know how strong the poison in his body was, and how serious his injuries were? Was she deliberately trying to attract his attention? Chu Tianfeng frowned slightly. As the young master of Burning Sky Palace, this kind of thing was naturally not uncommon. No matter if it was a disciple of Burning Sky Palace, or a sect that belonged to Burning Sky Palace. There would always be young and beautiful female cultivators who would try to attract his attention in all kinds of ways. But before he could say anything, he heard the young girl continue to say, "I can cure the poison for you." But Meng Qi paused, her clear eyes looking at Chu Tianfeng, and calmly continued, "I want to collect money." Chapter 2. What? Chu Tianfeng was instantly in a trance. Collect money? This word was not only unfamiliar. To the young master of Burning Sky Palace, it was especially distant. No one had ever talked to him about money, especially young women. He almost thought that he had misheard. Meng Qi, the Cool Breeze Valley sect master standing beside Chu Tianfeng, had a solemn expression. Don't mess around. The main hall of Cool Breeze Valley became absolutely silent. The mountain wind whistled past, as if it had become all the sound here. All the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley looked at Meng Qi in unison. This junior sister who had entered the sect for more than half a year was a quiet and well-behaved model in the eyes of most people. They didn't expect that she would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Cool Breeze Valley was a medical cultivation sect. Most of the disciples also had the idea of learning medical skills and being able to survive in the Trichilia chasm. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with charging for treatment. But the target was the high and mighty young master of Burning Sky Palace. If it was them, they were more willing to make friends with this proud and handsome youth. Meng Qi's expression was still as calm as water. She bowed to the sect master. "I want to try and see if I can cure the poison of the young master of Burning Sky Palace." She didn't even want to call Chu Tianfeng's name, trying her best not to have the slightest connection with him. "But, you want money, right?" Chu Tianfeng coldly continued. He felt the pain that had clearly been relieved just now surge up from his limbs and bones again. The black-clothed youth stood tall and looked coldly at the green-robed girl in front of him. Sure enough, even if they both came from Cool Breeze Valley, there could be a kind, brave, and simple girl like Lu Qingran. There could also be this kind of. Chu Tianfeng's gaze became colder and sharper than the cold wind. He looked at Meng Qi quietly, his voice even colder than his gaze. "Are you sure you can cure my poison? Fellow Daoist Chu." The Cool Breeze Valley sect master wanted to speak up for Meng Qi. Even if she was reckless, she was still a talented disciple in the sect. "Sect master, no need to say more." Chu Tianfeng coldly interrupted the sect master. He had never been humiliated like this. Never. Over the years, he had long been accustomed to the treatment of being the moon surrounded by stars. All the girls he met wanted to give up everything for him. He had never seen anyone charge money to cure his poison. "Let her detoxify." Chu Tianfeng looked at Meng Qi. "How much do you want?" Meng Qi hesitated. "How much should I collect?" Many of the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley had joined the sect for the sake of their medical skills. After leaving the sect, many of them would look for cities or forces to become doctors. 1200 KSW. Net in order to survive in the Trichilia chasm. However, Meng Qi himself had never thought of making money with his medical skills. In her previous life, she had wholeheartedly pursued the path of medical cultivation. To be able to break through the 5th grade in medical skills as a Shouja who had just entered the Jindan stage, this was outstanding even in the Trichilia chasm. But to sever karma, Meng Qi stared at Chu Tianfeng for a while with her big eyes. She turned her head to look at the Cool Breeze Valley sect leader. "Sect leader." She bowed again. "How much should I charge?" The expression of the Cool Breeze Valley sect leader changed unpredictably. She looked at Meng Qi hesitantly. She didn't know how things had turned out like this. "Meng Qi." She pretended not to hear what this little disciple had just said. "Do you know, the poison that fellow Daoist Chu was poisoned with?" The sect leader hesitated. "It is not easy to cure." Medical skills and cultivation were not absolutely related. However, if one's cultivation was too low, to put it bluntly, Some medicines could not be made and used. There were too few things that could be done. Meng Qi, the sect leader, looked up and down at this disciple who usually didn't speak much. She only had lianqi cultivation. The poison that Chu Tianfeng was poisoned with came from a 5th-grade demon. She could really cure it. The sect leader didn't believe it. This disciple read 2 books related to detoxification in the library a few days ago. Meng Qi thought and said, although my cultivation is still low, medical skills do not rely on cultivation. This was a realization that she had spent a long time in her previous life. It was also after understanding this point that Meng Qi's medical skills improved by leaps and bounds. She broke through to the 4th grade at the foundation establishment stage. But the poison that fellow Daoist Chu was poisoned with, the sect leader reminded her. It is not a small matter. This disciple is willing to give it a try, Meng Qi said. Chu Tianfeng almost laughed out loud. This woman was not only a little qi refinement cultivator, and she was going to use him as a test subject. His gaze was as cold as a cold star, and his dark eyes stared straight at Meng Qi. The poison of a 5th-grade demon is far beyond what I can cure. The sect leader didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But now, no one could do anything. She saw that Meng Qi was so confident. She remembered that the elders in the sect had praised her many times in front of her, saying that Meng Qi's medical skills were so excellent that she might not lose to her most valued disciple, Lu Qingran. If it's converted into spirit stones. The sect leader hesitated. It should be about 500 5th-grade spirit stones. What the sect leader didn't say was that the Almighty who could cure a 5th-grade demon's poison had long since looked down on worldly things like spirit stones. What could catch their eye were usually some heavenly treasures, as well as refined magic weapons. Okay. Meng Qi nodded. She thought about it seriously again. Cool Breeze Valley disciples could receive a certain amount of spirit stones as a supplement when they completed the sect's missions. Just like spells, spirit stones were also divided into 9 grades. Most of the time, the reward for completing the sect's ordinary missions was 10 1st-grade spirit stones. 1,000 1st-grade spirit stones could be exchanged for 1 2nd-grade spirit stone. Then 500 5th-grade spirit stones. Meng Qi looked at the black-clothed man in front of her, whose face was getting paler and paler. She remembered that the other party had a deep entanglement with senior martial sister Lu Qingran. At least before she died in her previous life, Chu Tianfeng often accompanied senior martial sister Lu. Then, to sever the karma with the other party, how many spirit stones should she charge? Chu Tianfeng was just about to say that he would give it to her. Wasn't it just 500 5th-grade spirit stones? The young palace master of Burning Sky Palace really didn't care about these worldly things. But he suddenly remembered that his storage bag had long been lost in the fight with the demon that had injured him. Now, he couldn't even take out 10 1st-grade spirit stones from head to toe. 5 6th-grade spirit stones. Before Chu Tianfeng could speak, he saw Meng Qi reach out a hand. The young girl's white and slender fingers opened, and her voice was still soft and sweet. Thank you. Chu Tianfeng, Cool Breeze Valley Sect Master. Meng Qi. Cool Breeze Valley disciples, this disciple knows. Meng Qi nodded lightly at the sect master. She actually didn't know how much to charge. Karma and luck obviously couldn't be directly measured with spirit stones. So she could only judge based on the close relationship between Chu Tianfeng and senior martial sister Lu Qingran. If she charged a normal fee, if she really cured Chu Tianfeng of his poison, the other party might still be grateful. So, she had to be more ruthless. For this kind of close relationship with senior martial sister, she should charge 10 times. Meng Qi made up her mind. She glanced at Chu Tianfeng. Although the black-clothed youth tried his best to straighten his back, his body was still trembling slightly. The hands hanging by his sides were clenched so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands could be seen. Chu Tianfeng, who was troubled by the demon's poison, should be in great pain. Meng Qi also remembered that in order to save senior martial sister Lu Qingran and leave, his storage bag was destroyed. She just wanted to save people, and the fee was to cut off karma. She didn't have to go too far. Young palace master can write an IOU first. Meng Qi looked at Chu Tianfeng with her big black and white eyes and said sincerely, "I believe you won't go back on your word." Chu Tianfeng really wanted to vomit blood. Not only did she charge him money, but she also used him as a test subject and raised the price in front of him. Now, his hands hanging by his sides trembled slightly. Probably because his realm was suppressed to the qi refinement stage, he felt that he couldn't even control his emotions well. This woman, he would let her, okay. Chu Tianfeng gritted his teeth and sneered, "I can give it to you, but if it can't be cured, pay with your life." Meng Qi said calmly. Chu Tianfeng, all the words that were about to come out of his mouth were all blocked by this sentence. Meng Qi had already turned around and walked out of the main hall calmly. The spiritual energy in the cold pool at the top of the mountain is the richest. Follow me. She wasn't joking. Before her rebirth, she could cure Chu Tianfeng's poison. After her rebirth, her chances would only be greater. What's more, if she really couldn't save Chu Tianfeng, the entire Cool Breeze Valley would be destroyed. With her current qi refinement stage cultivation, it was impossible for her to survive the chaotic catastrophe of the demon world's invasion. Chu Tianfeng followed without saying a word. He even forgot to look at Lu Qingran again. The proud black-clothed youth followed behind Meng Qi with a cold face and strode out of the main hall. The two people, one in front and one behind, gradually walked further and further away. They gradually disappeared into the clouds of Cool Breeze Valley. At this time, the main hall, which had been quiet for a long time, finally broke out in whispers. Compared to the enthusiasm when they first saw the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace, the Cool Breeze Valley disciples' gazes became a little strange. They looked in the direction Meng Qi left and didn't know what to say for a long time. Lan Zhuxian clenched her fists. She thought that this junior sister Meng Qi was so noble and virtuous. What wholeheartedly focused on medical cultivation. Wasn't it? She actually thought of such a way to get close to the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace. She didn't believe that junior sister could cure the poison that even the sect master was helpless against in just half a year. But no matter what, junior sister Meng's trick would definitely leave a deep impression on this handsome and powerful young palace master. Lan Zhuxian looked at the entrance of the main hall with some unwillingness. There, she couldn't see the figures of Meng Qi and Chu Tianfeng anymore. If she had known earlier, she would have stepped forward just now. No one would blame her if she couldn't cure the poison that even the sect master was helpless against. When Cool Breeze Valley was first built here, it was because of the cold pond at the peak of the mountain. Before Meng Qi got close, she felt the cold wind hit her in the face. The cold air was like thin needles that quickly invaded her body. Her body was thin and she was only a Lianqi Xiuzhe. This cold pond was the place where the Cool Breeze Valley sect master and elders cultivated. But even they would only come here for one day a month at most. Meng Qi stopped walking and took out a small fiery red pill from her bracelet storage bag and slowly put it in her mouth. This was originally a very ordinary first-grade pill, Warm Spring. But the pill she was taking now had been slightly modified by her. It could allow Lianqi and Zhuji Xiuzhe to not fear the cold air in the cold pond. Meng Qi put the pill under her tongue and took 2 more steps forward. She suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Chu Tianfeng, who was 2 steps away from her. "Are you cold?" Meng Qi remembered that after he was poisoned and injured, his cultivation was suppressed to Lianqi. It was obvious that he couldn't resist the cold of this cold pond. Chu Tianfeng looked at Meng Qi with an ashen face. Of course he was cold, but he wouldn't say it. The young palace master of Burning Sky Palace had never admitted defeat, much less to this greedy girl who was as greedy as her life. "For you," Meng Qi touched her bracelet storage bag and took out another pill to give to Chu Tianfeng. "No need." Chu Tianfeng opened his mouth and his teeth clattered together. His face instantly burned. If his cultivation was still there, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state. The cold pond in the sect is rich in spirit energy and the cold air can break the bones. It can make you feel much better when the poison acts up. Meng Qi held the pill with one hand. It can also force the poison air to stop it from wandering around your body and being unable to be drawn out. They were already far away from the main hall of Cool Breeze Valley and stood on the peak on the other side of the mountain. There was no one else around, Only Meng Qi's voice came along with the cold wind. Her voice was very pleasant to hear. Even if the tone of her voice didn't fluctuate much. But it was soft and sweet, like a sweet spring. It made people feel very comfortable. Hearing the other person's patient explanation, Chu Tianfeng's expression became slightly better. Just now, he almost suspected that the other party was deliberately making him embarrass himself. I forgot that your cultivation is suppressed by the demonic poison and the Lianqi Shouja in the sect are also not allowed to get close to the cold pond, Meng Qi said again. Chu Tianfeng's expression became even more relaxed. This spring warmth can prevent you from being hurt by the cold air in the cold pond. Don't worry, Meng Qi's voice was gentle as she explained. Chu Tianfeng's expression became more relaxed. His arm moved slightly. So the other person had good intentions. His rejection was so straightforward that Meng Qi probably misunderstood and thought that he suspected there was something wrong with the pill. That was why she explained it this way. I'm not. Chu Tianfeng opened his mouth and was about to say that he didn't suspect there was something wrong with Meng Qi's pill. As if to prove himself, he simply reached out and took the pill in Meng Qi's palm. He held the fiery red pill in his hand. It was warm to the touch. He was a little surprised. He had seen similar low-level medicinal pills before, but this one, Chu Tianfeng imitated Meng Qi and put the pill under his tongue. A warm feeling instantly spread through his limbs and bones. It was as if the bone-deep soreness that had been pestering him all the time after he was poisoned had faded a lot. It was indeed a little different from the ordinary spring warmth. This is something I improved. In addition to the main ingredient, the flame grass, I also collected the seeds of the flame grass and refined them inside, Meng Qi explained again. The chill eased. Even the pain caused by the poison seemed to have eased a lot. No matter how much of a genius Chu Tianfeng was, he was still a teenager. Just now, he was so angry at Meng Qi that he swore to teach him a lesson. But now, he felt that the other party's calm voice in the cold wind didn't sound so hateful. Meng Qi continued, you can buy an ordinary spring warmth for 15 first-grade spirit stones. Then he heard the other party say, this will be charged separately. 200 first-grade spirit stones. Chu Tianfeng, his expression, which had just eased, instantly sank again. Very good. He remembered it. As the young master of Burning Sky Palace, Chu Tianfeng didn't care about such a small matter as 1 or 200 low-level spirit stones at all. It was just that, Chu Tianfeng originally followed Meng Qi out with the mood of watching a joke, but now he was a little silent. Other than being angry that the other party talked about money again. There were more thoughts. He looked at the slender green-robed girl in front of him with a complicated gaze. She seemed to be a little different. Maybe, she really had a way, Chu Tianfeng gritted his teeth. He looked around. The cold pond was not far in front of him. His realm was suppressed to the qi condensation stage. Without this pill, he was afraid that he really couldn't move an inch. He thought of the disdain and contempt that might appear on Meng Qi's face when the time came. Instead, he held the pill tighter in his mouth and stepped forward to follow. The Cool Breeze Valley's cold pond was indeed the place with the densest spirit energy on the entire mountain peak. Chu Tianfeng stood by the pond. With Meng Qi's improved spring warmth, his whole body was warm and cozy. Taking a deep breath, he only felt that spirit energy was abundant, and his body had become a little more relaxed. Take off your clothes, Meng Qi ordered indifferently. The black-robed youth suddenly turned around and looked at the girl unblinkingly with eyes as bright as cold stars. On the other party's delicate and pretty face, her skin was as white as jade, and there wasn't the slightest trace of embarrassment. Not only that, Meng Qi had already turned around and stood beside a large rock. She was constantly taking out herbs from her storage bracelet. These were all things that she had collected bit by bit after her rebirth. Even though there weren't any treasures, she had put in a lot of effort. There were several times when Meng Qi had almost been injured in order to get some of these things. But these weren't enough. She took out all the things that could be used, and then turned around to look at Chu Tianfeng. The black-robed youth was standing behind her, his body tall and straight. His handsome and flawless features seemed colder than the cold pond, and there wasn't any warmth in his eyes. Seeing Meng Qi turn around, he sneered. Chu Tianfeng's slender fingers were on his lapel, his eyes looking into Meng Qi's as he nimbly took off his outer robe. The black robe was thrown to the side. Then it was the pure white inner robe. The youth's wheat-colored skin was gradually exposed to the cold air. He was a Xiuzhe. And he was the young palace master of a famous sect like Burning Sky Palace. Not only was his appearance outstanding, his figure was also very good. He still looked like a youth, his back straight. His neck was slender, his shoulders wide and his waist narrow. There wasn't a trace of fat on his body, and he looked handsome and tall. Chu Tianfeng's lips held a cold smile. He didn't care so much about his injuries right now. Instead, he started to be curious about what this Meng Qi was going to do. And he didn't believe that this person who looked like a delicate and pretty girl could remain calm in front of him like this. She would definitely. Meng Qi's clear gaze fell on Chu Tianfeng's shoulder. Even though it had been treated simply, 3 small black holes could still be seen. Those were the scars left by a 5th-grade monster. Even now, black mist could be seen occasionally rising from the wound. Even the area around the wound on Chu Tianfeng's shoulder had become pitch black. Meng Qi frowned. She pointed to the cold pond next to her. Go in. Chu Tianfeng. He didn't say a word, and jumped into the cold pond as told. Even with the spring warmth given by Meng Qi, he still couldn't help but shiver when the cold pond water reached his shoulders. Seeing this, Meng Qi took out another spring warmth from her storage bracelet. 200 first-grade spirit stones. As she spoke, she carried the spring warmth to Chu Tianfeng. Silently grabbing the fiery red pill, the young master of Burning Sky Palace was just about to speak. His body suddenly stiffened. The sharp pain instantly spread from his shoulder. Here it comes again. Chu Tianfeng gritted his teeth, preparing to resist the pain of tens of thousands of needles piercing into his bones. If it was just sharp pain, he could endure it. However, that kind of pain was akin to holding countless sharp needles and stabbing them into the weakest parts of his bones and skin at the same time. It really made him feel like dying. Especially now that his cultivation was suppressed to the qi refinement stage, he couldn't resist the overwhelming pain when the poison acted up at all. Chu Tianfeng relied entirely on his impressive willpower to support himself and not cry out in pain in front of Meng Qi. In a trance, Chu Tianfeng thought he heard a soft sigh. That sigh was somewhat far away, but it also seemed to be very close to him. He subconsciously raised his head. The young girl in front of him still looked plain and clean. Her small face was expressionless. Only in that pair of black and white eyes, there seemed to be a flash of excitement. He really thought too much. Chu Tianfeng closed his eyes. How could this person let out such a sigh? Then in the next moment, the young girl's slightly cold and slender fingers, accompanied by a faint medicinal fragrance, gently pressed on Chu Tianfeng's shoulder. Like a spring breeze, his body stiffened again. Chapter 3. Meng Qi reached out and lightly pressed on Chu Tianfeng's shoulder. She had already formed a spell to extract the essence of the herbs and flowers that she had picked out. The light green herb essence was lightly picked up by her fingers and landed on Chu Tianfeng's wound. In just a moment, the bone-piercing pain seemed to fade a bit. Chu Tianfeng's mind became a bit clearer. He opened his eyes again and looked at the young girl that was close to him. Her cheeks were white, and there was no makeup on her clean little face. Her gaze was focused on the wound on his shoulder. She really had the demeanor of Liu Xiaohui, who looked straight ahead. Chu Tianfeng's lips moved slightly. He wanted to say something, but a chill came from his shoulder. The bone-piercing pain that tormented him every hour didn't seem so unbearable. He closed his eyes again and didn't say a word. Meng Qi's right hand formed a spell, and bit by bit, she tentatively touched Chu Tianfeng's wound. She was only a Lianqi Xiuzhe right now, and her medical skills had barely broken through to 2nd grade. She couldn't use more powerful spells. But she was very familiar with 1st-grade medical spells. In the half-year of her rebirth, she had already practiced them to the point that she was incomparably familiar with them. Her level of familiarity far surpassed all the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley. Spells were also divided into grades. Other than their own grade, they could be used to increase their realm through continuous use. They were divided into 9 realms. It was said that one could break through the 9 realms and reach even stronger realms. But very few people could cultivate to that level. Before Meng Qi had died in her last life, she had already been a 5th-grade medical cultivator. Even in the 3,000 worlds, she would have some fame at this level. She would be respectfully called a medical practitioner. Even if she went to a large sect like Burning Sky Palace, she would still be respected. She was very talented in medical skills, but her strongest point was that she was very familiar with using these low-level spells that many people looked down on. Like the Clear Breeze spell that she was using to remove the poison from Chu Tianfeng. That was a 1st-grade medical spell. Almost every medical cultivator knew it. Even Lianqi Xiuzhe couldn't not learn this spell. However, there probably weren't any Lianqi cultivators who could cultivate it to Realm 4 like Meng Qi. There was no shortcut to practicing the incantation. It was all about repeating it day after day. This was a very boring process. In the town at the foot of Clear Wind Valley, there were many normal citizens who were not Xiuzhe. Almost all the people who were sick or injured in the past 6 months had been treated by the Meng Qi. The small animals in the Cool Breeze Valley had also been treated by Meng Qi after they were injured. When there was really no one who could cure her, she would take some poison herself so that she could repeatedly use this incantation. Therefore, although she was only a cultivator at the Qi refining stage, her medical skills were only at the 2nd grade. The 4th realm Clear Breeze technique could also help Chu Tianfeng get rid of the poison. It was just that it was a little strenuous. In less than half an hour, Meng Qi sat down on the edge of the cold pond, exhausted. It was still a little difficult. She closed her eyes, took out another pill from her inventory bag and put it in her mouth. Then, he formed a seal with his hands and sat down cross-legged. The slightly cool medicinal scent of the pill flowed along the tip of his tongue and slowly spread throughout his body. The originally empty Ling energy started to slowly recover. Chu Tianfeng opened his eyes again and looked at Meng Qi. His expression was a little complicated. Although his cultivation was suppressed, he had already formed his core. He also came from a famous sect like Burning Sky Palace, so he was experienced and knowledgeable. Meng Qi was really too weak. She had to forcibly get rid of the poison of a 5th-grade demon with her Qi refining cultivation. It was too difficult. Chu Tianfeng's eyes flashed, staring unblinkingly at the beads of sweat that slowly slid down Meng Qi's cheeks. The incantation she used to get rid of the poison for him was only a 1st-grade incantation. It had only been half an hour, and she already couldn't hold on. Xiuzhe relied on Ling energy to cast incantations. Qi refining stage Xiuzhe had the least Ling energy. Even a cultivator at the peak of Qi refining stage could only use a 1st-grade incantation a dozen times at most before their Ling energy would dry up. Meng Qi was already exhausted after 7 or 8 times. She was probably at the 8th or 9th level of Qi refining. Chu Tianfeng thought silently. His gaze subconsciously fell on the fair skin of the girl in front of him. The chill of the cold pond pervaded the air, and the entire mountain peak was covered in a thin mist. The face of the greedy and money-loving Meng Qi in such a thin mist didn't seem as annoying as before. Instead, it seemed a little more immortal. There was a thin layer of sweat on her face, and a sparkling bead of sweat was sliding down her cheek. Finally, it dripped down along her small chin, almost subconsciously. Chu Tianfeng raised his hand, wanting to catch this sparkling bead of sweat. He forgot that he was in the cold pond. His hand just moved, and the sound of splashing water sounded. Meng Qi, who had her eyes closed just now, suddenly opened her eyes. There was a layer of lustrous light on her eyes. The poison is acting up again. Meng Qi frowned slightly. Her delicate eyebrows furrowed, looking exceptionally cute. Although the cold pond can block the poison and make it convenient for me to get rid of the poison. But the poison of a high-level demon already has a trace of spiritual awareness. Although Meng Qi was talking about such a serious matter, her voice was still so soft. So during this process, the time of the attack may be more frequent. She reached out and touched her storage bracelet, took out a green pill, and handed it to Chu Tianfeng. My spiritual energy doesn't recover that fast. You will feel more comfortable with this in your mouth. Chu Tianfeng took the pill silently. Before he put it into his mouth, the medicinal fragrance hit his face, making him feel very comfortable. In fact, it didn't act up again. And even if it did, he wouldn't be unable to endure it. But he didn't say anything. He couldn't tell Meng Qi what he was going to do just now. Chu Tianfeng watched the girl close her eyes again. The bead of sweat had long disappeared. He found it funny. Just now, it was as if he was really possessed, and he actually did such a subconscious action. Obviously, he looked down on this medical skill. It seemed to be good. But a girl who loved money like her life. In comparison, he still appreciated a kind and simple girl like Lu Qingran more. She was so brave, knowing that she was no match for the demon. She knew that she was much better than her. But when she encountered danger, she would still rush out to block the girl in front of her. Putting these aside, Lu Qingran was much cuter than Meng Qi. She spoke interestingly and was knowledgeable. She didn't seem to be from a small sect like Cool Breeze Valley at all. Since the two of them met, they had always been quite compatible. They traveled together and never had to worry about not finding a topic to talk about. Thinking of Lu Qingran, Chu Tianfeng's expression softened. He didn't know if she had woken up. She was too frightened. As long as he thought of that pale little face, he couldn't help but feel distressed. When Meng Qi opened her eyes, she saw Chu Tianfeng like this. She didn't say anything and reached out again to press on his shoulder. The two of them repeated the process like this. Detoxification, then Meng Qi recovered her spiritual energy. She was used to such a dry and somewhat boring process. Time seemed to pass very quickly, but also seemed to pass very slowly. The sky on the mountain peak went from bright to starry. Then, the sky was once again filled with sunset, and night slowly fell. A day and a night passed just like that. Chu Tianfeng still had to endure the pain of tens of thousands of needles piercing his bones every 2 hours. But he also felt that as Meng Qi sent the essence of the herbs into his body again and again. As the cool breeze technique brushed across his shoulder again and again like a spring breeze. The pain when the poison acted up was getting lighter and lighter. In the end, he didn't need to grit his teeth. He could use the cold air in the cold pool to resist the piercing pain. Chang Xiong Chinese network, half of your poison has been removed. Meng Qi said as she retracted her hand. She stood up shakily. She should have been tired. But her expression looked quite relaxed. I don't have the rest of the needed herbs, nor do the sect. Meng Qi stood by the cold pool. You can come up now. As she spoke, she stretched her limbs and moved her body. Although this day and night was tiring, the harvest was quite good. She had already practiced the cool breeze technique to the 4th realm. Probably because the poison she removed this time was a 5th-grade demonic poison, her proficiency increased rapidly. Meng Qi even looked at Chu Tianfeng with some regret. Once the technique reached the 3rd realm, it would become very difficult to improve further. From the 1st realm to the 2nd realm, it might only take half a month. From the 2nd realm to the 3rd realm, it might take 2 months. From the 3rd realm to the 4th realm, if Meng Qi didn't have the experience of her previous life and had her own understanding of these low-level techniques, even if she only practiced this one technique day and night without the problem of insufficient spiritual energy, it wouldn't be possible without 2 or 3 years. As for the 4th realm and above, it was even more difficult. But this time, she removed the poison for Chu Tianfeng. Meng Qi felt that her cool breeze technique at the 4th realm seemed to have improved greatly. If this continued, she might break through in less than half a month. Chu Tianfeng had already returned to the shore. He was still bare-chested. The young man's body was slender and tall. He was silent and put on his clothes again. The black robe was also a magic treasure. Most of the reason why he was able to escape from the claws of the demonic creatures this time was because of this robe that his father gave him. Chu Tianfeng looked at Meng Qi. After spending a day and a night together, he had an indescribable feeling. When he came with her yesterday, he was still full of disdain and mockery. He just wanted to see what tricks this greedy and money-loving girl was playing. Was she deliberately attracting his attention in another way? In any case, he was certain that Meng Qi couldn't remove the poison for him. But now, Chu Tianfeng didn't know what to say. She really could cure him. If Chu Tianfeng still couldn't figure this out, then he didn't deserve to be the young palace master of the Burning Sky Palace. You. Chu Tianfeng pursed his dry lips. His heart suddenly moved. Do you want to come to the Burning Sky Palace? Chem. Meng Qi turned her head and looked at Chu Tianfeng in surprise. Of course she knew about the Burning Sky Palace. It was one of the top 10 sects in the eastern border. It was like heaven and earth compared to Cool Breeze Valley. There are elders in the Burning Sky Palace who specialize in medicine, and it's also one of the highly valued branches of the sect. Chu Tianfeng was a bit regretful, but still forced himself to continue. If you want to go, I can recommend you. As the young palace master, he naturally had this power. Or rather, as the young palace master, Chu Tianfeng didn't need to worry about the sect's affairs right now. He only needed to focus on cultivation. But now he really felt that Meng Qi could be recruited. He was the young palace master of the Burning Sky Palace. He knew too well what it meant for a Qi disciple to be able to cure the poison of a 5th-grade demonic creature. The more Chu Tianfeng thought about it, the more reasonable he felt it was. When he spoke again, even his voice was a bit excited. There are countless spells in the Burning Sky Palace, and there's also a specialized medical library. After you enter, you can read them all. Chem. Meng Qi's heart moved. Of course she knew the benefits of a large sect. However, she had to be alive to read it. Meng Qi took out a bamboo slip from her bosom and quickly wrote. Then she handed the bamboo slip to Chu Tianfeng. Under the other's puzzled gaze, Meng Qi spoke. I know you can't take out that many spirit stones for the time being. 5 6th-grade spirit stones wasn't a small amount, and even Chu Tianfeng's storage bag had been destroyed by the demonic creature. She said, sign the IOU first. Chapter 4. An IOU. Chu Tianfeng took the bamboo slip. The finger-long bamboo slip was as smooth as jade, very comfortable to hold in his hand. In the blink of an eye, he saw the contents written on the bamboo slip. Today, Chu Tianfeng of the Burning Heaven Palace owes Meng Qi 5 6th-grade spirit stones and 900 1st-grade spirit stones. The deadline is 1 month, and interest will be paid every month. It was the first time in his life that the young palace master of the Burning Heaven Palace saw an IOU. The little flame of excitement and appreciation that had just ignited in him was completely extinguished with a kai sound. He gritted his teeth and left his divine sense imprint on the bamboo slip. Chu Tianfeng returned the bamboo slip to Meng Qi. Then he turned around and walked towards the residence of the Cool Breeze Valley sect. Meng Qi put the bamboo slip back into her storage bracelet. She didn't leave immediately. Instead, she sat cross-legged beside the cold pond with a grain of spring warmth in her mouth. This day and night had consumed too much energy, but she had also gained a lot. The way of the world was never as peaceful as it seemed on the surface. Every bit of strength counted. The moon moved and the stars tilted. The morning sun rose. The sun shone on her white cheeks. Meng Qi's long eyelashes fluttered twice, and she slowly opened her eyes. Yesterday, she repeatedly used her empty spirit qi, then filled it up, and used it again. And what she faced was the poison of a 5th-grade demon. After 1 day and 1 night, she was already close to perfection at the 8th level of qi refining. Now she directly broke through the 8th level and smoothly entered the 9th level. Yuwenku. Meng Qi nodded in satisfaction and stood up. Half of Chu Tianfeng's poison still hadn't been cured. She needed a few herbs that could be found in the mountain range next to the Cool Breeze Valley and the Demon World. It was still safe there for now. Meng Qi had done something similar in her previous life, but she didn't have the experience at that time. Moreover, the Cool Breeze technique was 1 level lower than in this life, so it took her 10 days and 10 nights to cure Chu Tianfeng. According to the current progress, it should be done in about 5 days. Meng Qi returned to the sect first. It was quiet in the Cool Breeze Valley. It was morning class time, and the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley were all cultivating. There was a small bamboo hut in Meng Qi, located halfway up the mountain. She packed a simple bag and prepared to pick herbs. As soon as she stepped out of the door, Senior Sister Lan Zhuxian stopped her. Junior Marshal Sister Meng. Lan Zhuxian crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked her up and down. You didn't come back last night? Her gaze fell on Meng Qi's green robe. The corners of Lan Zhuxuan's lips curled up. She smiled with some schadenfreude. I heard that the young palace master of the Burning Sky Palace came back first last night. Is that so? Meng Qi replied faintly. Yes. Lan Zhuxian rolled her eyes. As soon as he returned, he went to visit junior martial sister Lu Qingran. You know, junior sister Lu is still unconscious, and young palace master Chu stayed by her bedside for the whole night. She smiled and continued, everyone says that young palace master Chu really likes junior sister Lu. Okay. Meng Qi nodded. Of course, she knew. Otherwise, she wouldn't have charged Chu Tianfeng 10 times the amount. Where are you going, junior martial sister Meng? Lan Zhuxian looked at the calm expression on Meng Qi's face and was not reconciled. Don't say that I didn't remind you. Young palace master Chu is still in junior martial sister Lu Qingran's room. If you go to him, I'm afraid you'll be asking for a snub. Lan Zhuxian raised her chin. It seems that junior martial sister Meng didn't cure young palace master Chu. I heard from sect leader and elder Yang that the poison in young palace master's body is still there. Junior martial sister Meng is really smart. She stepped forward at that time. Whether she can cure young palace master Chu or not, she must have left a deep impression on him. I just don't know. Lan Zhuxian smiled playfully. Is it a good or bad impression? Senior martial sister Lan. Meng Qi completely understood. The 3,000 worlds are full of dangers. If senior martial sister has time, you should seize the time to cultivate and make yourself stronger. Her tone was sincere. Otherwise, it will be difficult to survive if something happens in the future. After Meng Qi finished speaking, she nodded at Lan Zhuxian. I have to leave the sect for a day. I'll leave first. Lan Zhuxian looked at Meng Qi's figure that was gradually disappearing. What are you being so arrogant for? She pursed her lips and fiddled with her hair. She was sure that this junior martial sister Meng had no way to cure the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace. She had made a fool of herself in front of him and might even be scolded by him. So when the other party was still in the sect, she didn't have the face to continue staying. She went out to hide. She wouldn't let her have her way. Lan Zhuxian curled her lips. She turned around, and before she took a few steps, she met a male disciple she knew in the sect. The other party was quite familiar with her. After greeting him, Lan Zhuxian immediately said, I saw junior martial sister Meng Qi leave the sect in a hurry just now. Do you know where she went? She said innocently, I was looking for junior martial sister for something, but I couldn't stop her even after calling her several times. I don't know. The disciple shook his head. Could it be? Lan Zhuxian blinked. Because she lied to the sect master and the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace and angered them, she was so scared that she ran out to hide. Ha ha. The disciple couldn't help but laugh. It's really possible. The day before yesterday, I saw junior martial sister Meng Qi stand up so confidently and say that she wanted to collect money or something. I thought she was very confident. Damn. You can't say that. Didn't Elder Yang praise junior martial sister Meng for her talent? Maybe she really thinks that a little qi refinement cultivator can cure the poison that even the sect master is helpless against. Haha, I think she saw that the young palace master is handsome and is from the Burning Sky Palace, so she even forgot who she is. I don't think junior martial sister Meng is such a person. The two of them talked as they walked away. Meng Qi didn't know that on the day she left, she shamelessly stuck to the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace and lied to him and the sect master. The rumors of her lying had already spread throughout Cool Breeze Valley. Meng Qi's memory was very good. It was already a few years ago that she went to pick herbs in her previous life. But she still remembered the approximate location. With the memory of the past, the time spent on the road was much less. At noon the next day, she returned to Cool Breeze Valley. Those herbs weren't considered expensive. Their grades were only first or second grade. Just like the Cool Breeze technique, the higher Meng Qi's medical skills in her previous life, the more she felt. In fact, whether it was medical skills or herbs, there shouldn't be too many grades. She could use the 4th level Cool Breeze technique to resolve the poison of the 5th grade demon that Chu Tianfeng was poisoned by. She could also use second-grade herbs to remove the remaining poison in the other party's body. People thought too much about grades. In fact, sometimes they would give up what was near and seek what was far away. She returned to Cool Breeze Valley with a big bag of herbs. It was exactly noon the second day after she left. The disciples of Cool Breeze Valley had finished their morning classes that day and were exchanging their cultivation experiences in 2s and 3s. Meng Qi still returned to her bamboo house first. Chu Tianfeng should still be at Lu Qingran's place at this time. According to the memories of her previous life, this senior martial sister Lu wouldn't wake up until she resolved Chu Tianfeng's poison. That wouldn't do. Because the more she detoxified the poison, the more difficult it would be. Meng Qi was very worried that she would be so tired that she would faint again. At that time, if senior martial sister Lu Qingran woke up and she fainted and couldn't defend herself, it would be troublesome if she was wronged again. Although she accepted Chu Tianfeng's spirit stones this time, she couldn't really completely cut off the karma. Meng Qi wasn't completely sure. Therefore, she simply plucked a few more stalks of mind-clearing grass. On the way back on the paper crane, she also refined a few heart-clearing pills. In fact, Cool Breeze Valley also had heart-clearing pills. The sect leader had also given them to Lu Qingran immediately. However, although she only fainted from fright, she still inhaled the Mo energy of a 5th-grade demon. Lu Qingran was only a Zhuji stage Shouja when the Mo energy invaded her body. That was why she was unconscious for so long. As Meng Qi walked in the direction of Lu Qingran's room, she nodded at the Cool Breeze Valley disciples she met on the way as a form of greeting. She soon realized that her senior brothers and senior sisters passing by were looking at her in a strange way. Several people were looking at her with mocking smiles on their faces. Meng Qi even heard someone say behind her, "She still has the face to come back. She doesn't think that since young Palace Master Chu left, this matter is over, right? She's a bit thick-skinned. Daring to do such a thing in public that day, you and I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wonder how she would feel seeing young Palace Master Chu still so affectionately guarding junior martial sister Lu." Meng Qi blinked. She suddenly turned around and looked at the senior martial brothers and sisters who were happily gathered together and whispering not far from her. When those people saw her turn around, they quickly left. But those words were clearly said for her to hear. Meng Qi frowned. Even though she felt that something was wrong, she still walked quickly towards Lu Qingran's room. As the direct disciple that the sect leader valued the most. Lu Qingran's room was in the place with the densest Ling energy in Cool Breeze Valley. Even though it could not compare to the cold pond, it was an independent little courtyard. There were some Ling flowers and grasses growing in the courtyard. When Meng Qi pushed open the door and entered, she felt comfortable all over. Her action of pushing open the courtyard door alerted the people in the room. The sect leader of Cool Breeze Valley walked out of the room. Her gaze landed on Meng Qi's face. She had heard some of the rumors in the sect these past 2 days. The sect leader did not believe that Meng Qi was such a person. But Lu Qingran was unconscious these past few days. The poison in Chu Tianfeng's body was still there, and it would still act up every 2 hours. If he did not talk about the pain when the poison acted up, others would not be able to tell how serious it was. And he did not want to talk about what happened at the cold pond that day. In addition, Meng Qi went straight down the mountain as soon as she came back. The sect leader of Cool Breeze Valley was worried about her direct disciple, so she did not have the heart to control the rumors among the disciples. At this time, she saw the calm Meng Qi and met the other party's clear eyes. The sect leader did not know why, but she suddenly felt a little guilty. "Sect leader." Meng Qi bowed to her. As soon as her voice fell, Chu Tianfeng, who heard Meng Qi's voice, also walked out of the room. He was still wearing the black robe. The youth's eyes were as black as ink, and his long hair was tied up with a small black sandalwood crown. His face was still pale, but compared to the day he carried Lu Qingran back to Cool Breeze Valley, his complexion was better. Meng Qi sized him up briefly before retracting his gaze. She walked into the room. "Has Lu Shijie not woken up yet? What do you want to do?" Chu Tianfeng did not even think as he flashed in front of Meng Qi and blocked the door. "Meng Qi," she looked at the youth in front of her whose eyes were bright and on guard against her. I brought back a few heart-clearing pills. She explained, Shijie has been unconscious for many days. She should have been affected by the presence of that demon. Heart-clearing pill? Chu Tianfeng stilled. Cool Breeze Valley also has it. Meng Qi nodded. When I made the heart-clearing pill, I added 2 kinds of medicine and increased the effect by 80%. This was a method she had learned from her benefactor. The Xiuzhe in the 3,000 worlds were divided into law Xiu and sword Xiu. There were also medical Xiu and forging. In the eyes of most Xiuzhe, these were only unorthodox cultivation methods. Of the 3,000 great paths of Xiuzhe, the great majority were mainly law Xiu and sword Xiu. Meng Qi had met an expert in her last life who was very skilled in forging. The two were both people who were very studious and hit it off immediately. In the end, they used the forging method on medicine. It was like when forging talismans, they could seal spells on talismans and weapons. They had thought of a way to seal spells on medicine pills. But Meng Qi had died too early and too suddenly. She knew this method, but it could only be used on low-level first-grade Dan. Thinking about it, this was probably the most regretful thing of her last life. Of course, she could not say these words to Chu Tianfeng. Meng Qi was a medical Xiu and knew very well that this method was enough to shake the entire medical Xiu world. Let me see. The sect leader of Cool Breeze Valley quickly walked over and took the pill from Meng Qi's hand. She lowered her head and sniffed. There was no problem with the pill. As for its effect, then let's try it. The sect leader sighed softly. She was only the sect leader of a small sect, and her ability was limited. In this trichiliocosm, to put it bluntly, she was like an ant. Most of the time, she was helpless. For example, now that her personal disciple was unconscious, she was helpless. The pill was quickly sent to Lu Qingran for her to take. Meng Qi turned to look at Chu Tianfeng. When Shijie wakes up, we will continue. The sect leader could finally ask, Meng Qi, how is the poison in fellow Daoist Chu's body? It hasn't been cured yet, Meng Qi said frankly. Chu Tianfeng frowned slightly. He looked down on Meng Qi's love for money, but the other party had indeed relieved a lot of his pain. Half of it has been cured, Chu Tianfeng said coldly. Really? The sect leader was very surprised. She agreed to Meng Qi's attempt, but in fact, it was just a desperate effort. After all, the entire Cool Breeze Valley was helpless at that time, and only Meng Qi dared to step forward. Chu Tianfeng dropped this sentence and sat silently to the side. Meng Qi also didn't explain. What came next was the most dangerous. She also found a chair to sit down and began to close her eyes to rest. The room suddenly became quiet. After a while, she finally heard a soft sound. Lu Qingran, who had been lying in bed in a coma for many days, slowly opened her eyes. Chu Tianfeng, who was sitting the furthest away, was the fastest to move. He suddenly jumped up and hurried to the side of the bed. Qingran. Chu Tianfeng leaned over to look at Lu Qingran. The girl's eyes were still a little confused, but when she saw him, her almond-shaped eyes widened. Tianfeng. Lu Qingran sat up immediately. You're fine. She suddenly threw herself into Chu Tianfeng's arms and hugged his waist tightly. I thought we were all going to die, it's okay. Chu Tianfeng lowered his head and gently patted Lu Qingran's shoulder. Just as he was about to comfort the beauty in his arms, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head. Ah! Chu Tianfeng reached out to press his forehead and staggered back. Tianfeng. Lu Qingran didn't care that she had just woken up and hurriedly reached out to support him. What happened to you? Meng Qi also took a step forward. He's suffering from the poison. Quick! Let him sit down. As she spoke, her right hand quickly formed a seal and placed it on Chu Tianfeng's head. Lu Qingran widened her eyes in surprise and looked at this somewhat unfamiliar junior martial sister in front of her. She looked at the other's familiar movements and calm face. Qingran. Until the sect leader's voice sounded beside her. Master. Lu Qingran turned to look at the sect leader, the rims of her eyes red. She threw herself into the sect leader's arms and was about to cry. Disciple. Disciple thought she would never see you again. It's okay. The sect leader sighed in relief and patted Lu Qingran's shoulder. This. Junior martial sister Meng Qi. Lu Qingran hugged the sect leader and acted coquettishly for a while, then turned to look at Meng Qi. She's detoxifying fellow Daoist Chu. The sect leader comforted her softly. It's fine as long as you're okay. But isn't junior martial sister Meng just in the qi condensation stage? Lu Qingran was even more surprised. Her eyes suddenly widened. Master, I remember. When we encountered that demonic creature, Disciple seemed to have seen a girl wearing Cool Breeze Valley's disciple robes together with that demonic creature. Didn't Disciple say it was junior martial sister Meng Qi? But junior martial sister Meng, she. Lu Qingran was also at a loss. That demonic creature is at the 5th stage, and junior martial sister Meng is only at the qi refining stage. How can she detoxify the poison? Disciple doesn't suspect her, but even Tianfeng. Could she be? She knew it. Although Meng Qi was detoxifying Chu Tianfeng, she heard everything very clearly. Fortunately, she had already predicted this and woke Lu Qingran up first. Otherwise, she would probably be locked up for another 3 months for no reason. Meng Qi exhaled and withdrew her hand from Chu Tianfeng's shoulder. She was about to speak, but a voice was faster than her. It's not her. Hey! Meng Qi was stunned. She subconsciously lowered her head to look at Chu Tianfeng. Chu Tianfeng had already opened his eyes at some point. His expression was calmer than before, but his gaze had become somewhat complicated. Especially when he was looking at her. Meeting Meng Qi's gaze, Chu Tianfeng quickly turned his head. He took a deep breath and said resolutely, Meng Qi is definitely not that kind of person. Chapter 5. Hey! Meng Qi blinked and looked at Chu Tianfeng in surprise. He actually spoke up for her. She hesitated for a moment and slowly swallowed back the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Burning Sky Palace's young palace master's words were sometimes better than 100 of her arguments. Meng Qi remembered that in her previous life, she was locked up in the dungeon for 3 months. When she was finally released, it was the sect master who investigated and found out that she was innocent. In fact, it was easy to investigate this matter. When Chu Tianfeng and Lu Qingran were injured, she didn't leave Cool Breeze Valley at all. At that time, Burning Sky Palace's experts personally verified that Meng Qi didn't have a trace of demonic energy. Most importantly, her qi refining stage cultivation wasn't fake. Whether it was sneaking out of Cool Breeze Valley or having demonic energy on her, she couldn't hide it from these powerful people. So if the demon realm hadn't invaded at that time, Meng Qi wouldn't have been locked up for 3 months. She didn't hate Cool Breeze Valley or the sect master that much. After being reborn, she just didn't want to waste those 3 months again. Chu Tianfeng's words not only silenced Meng Qi, but also Lu Qingran. She didn't seem to expect that the one who spoke would be Chu Tianfeng. She was stunned for a moment before she murmured, "But, it's not her." Chu Tianfeng shook his head even more firmly. He raised his head slightly and looked at Meng Qi, who seemed to be deep in thought. Meng Qi also happened to have her head down. Her eyes met with Chu Tianfeng's. The youth's eyes were still as cold as the stars. Even if the poison suddenly flared up, his figure in black clothes was still straight. But when he looked at Meng Qi, a dark and complicated light flashed through his eyes. Meng Qi blinked. Chu Tianfeng even turned his head away uncomfortably, as if he didn't want to continue looking at her. Lu Qingran hesitated for a moment and said, "But Tianfeng, the poison you were poisoned, she was already the most talented disciple in Cool Breeze Valley." At that time, Chu Tianfeng had been injured protecting her. She had examined him and found that his injuries weren't that serious because he was protected by Xian Yi. The key was the poison. Lu Qingran knew that she definitely could not cure it. Junior sister Meng Qi had only been in the sect for more than half a year. No matter how talented she was, she couldn't skip several realms to detoxify the poison. Even if it was his teacher, he would probably, that day, the one who was with that demonic creature was at least at the Golden Core realm. "It can't be your junior sister." But Lu Qingran still wanted to say something. "She can't hide her cultivation from me." Chu Tianfeng guessed what Lu Qingran was suspecting, so he spoke again. His voice was still slightly cold. Although she was speaking for Meng Qi, she didn't look at her again after turning her eyes away. Yes. Seeing that Chu Tianfeng kept speaking up for Meng Qi, it was obvious that he wanted to protect her. Lu Qingran was silent for a moment, but she still nodded obediently. Since Chu Tianfeng trusted Meng Qi so much, it meant that there was nothing wrong with this junior sister. Lu Qingran believed in this powerful man who would risk his life to save her. She turned to look at Meng Qi, her expression slightly blushing. "I'm sorry, junior sister Meng." Lu Qingran said sincerely, "I was just too worried about Tianfeng just now. He was injured while protecting me. That demonic creature was especially powerful. I was really worried. It's okay." Meng Qi waved his hand and interrupted her. "It's fine as long as you explain it clearly." To be honest, he was very wary of Lu Qingran, the legendary daughter of the Heavenly Tao. In his previous life, he died inexplicably because of her. In this life, Meng Qi cultivated hard because he had already made up his mind. When this crisis was over, he would have enough strength. She would leave Cool Breeze Valley and even the Eastland. Meng Qi remembered that his teacher had said that he came from a hidden sect in the Westland. The Trichilia chasm was very big, and the Eastland and the Westland only differed by one word. For an ordinary cultivator like Meng Qi, it was extremely difficult and dangerous to cross the border to find someone. But it didn't matter. She could cultivate while heading west. Meng Qi had heard her mysterious teacher describe that there was a very powerful medical sect in the Westland. There were great medical cultivators who were almost at the peak of 8th grade. There were also peak medical cultivators who could cultivate medicine to the point of perfection and say that everything in the world can be medicine. There were also countless kindred spirit cultivators who were benevolent and benevolent. Meng Qi had long yearned for it. At that time, she was about to form her gold core. Her teacher also promised that when she formed her gold core, he would take her to the Westland to see if she could enter that medical sect. Unfortunately, Meng Qi shook his head. So everything in front of her was just a fleeting cloud. Since the problem was explained clearly, he wouldn't let her waste another 3 months in the dungeon. The less entanglements he had with this daughter of the Heavenly Tao, the better. Junior Marshal Sister Meng, it doesn't matter. Meng Qi waved her hand, once again stopping her from continuing. She stood up, but her words were directed at Chu Tianfeng. "Let's go to the cold pond." Without the help of the cold pond, Meng Qi wasn't sure that she could completely suppress the demonic poison. Chu Tianfeng nodded. He stood up silently and followed Meng Qi out the door. Tianfeng. Lu Qingran didn't care that she had just woken up and her body was still very weak. She also stood up. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Lu Qingran was really beautiful. Even in the 3,000 worlds with countless beauties, she was still very outstanding. She had delicate eyebrows, cherry lips, and a straight nose. Her big eyes were as bright as stars, and her petite face was like the most delicate and lovely lady in a painting. She was like an otherworldly fairy. Just by standing there with a pale face, she had an immortal aura that other people didn't have. Meng Qi didn't look sideways as he strode past Lu Qingran. Chu Tianfeng hurriedly followed. His expression was somewhat complicated. Although the proud Burning Sky Palace young palace master still had his back straight, the infatuated youth who was still foolishly guarding Lu Qingran a few days ago. As if he had completely forgotten about her, he also didn't look sideways as he walked past her. He didn't even seem to hear the other person calling his name. He just quickly followed Meng Qi and left the small courtyard where Lu Qingran lived alone. "Master." Watching the two people leave one after the other, Lu Qingran's eyes reddened again. She gently bit her lower lip and turned to look at the sect master of Cool Breeze Valley. "Is junior sister angry with me? Is Tianfeng angry as well?" "It's fine." The sect master lovingly stroked her hair. This was her most valued disciple. Cool Breeze Valley might flourish in her hands. She had high expectations for Lu Qingran. "You just woke up. Don't think about this first. Rest well for a few days." FQXSW. Org yes. Lu Qingran nodded obediently. Junior Sister Meng is really amazing. She thought for a moment then said, the demonic creature Tianfeng and I encountered that day was very powerful. Tianfeng was already in the core formation realm, but he wasn't its opponent at all. Plus, he still had to protect me. Lu Qingran's voice gradually lowered. A trace of shyness flashed across her face as she recalled the scene of the youth desperately protecting her. He was injured and poisoned, and the demonic creature chased after him. At that time, I thought I would never see Master again. As Lu Qingran spoke, tears rolled down her cheeks again. The sect master of Cool Breeze Valley sighed softly. She reached out and patted her disciple's shoulder. Meng Qi is indeed only in the Qi refining realm. I asked Elder Yang. Her medical skills are also only in the second rank. Then how did she? I don't know. The sect master shook her head. It's just, speaking of this disciple, she also had a bit of a headache. She took spirit stones to remove the poison from fellow Daoist Chu. Huh? Lu Qingran widened her eyes blankly. I also don't know what she's thinking. The sect master didn't know whether to laugh or cry. To be able to remove poison from a higher realm and save fellow Daoist Chu's life, this kind of thing isn't something that can be calculated with spirit stones. But she just took spirit stones. Then Junior Martial Sister Meng, she. Lu Qingran blinked her eyes. Is she short of money? I don't know. The sect master could only smile bitterly. Even you. You were unconscious for several days, and the mind-clearing pills in the sect were completely useless to you. It was also she who gave you medicine that allowed you to wake up. Lu Qingran was even more surprised. All right. You just woke up, so we'll talk about these things later. The sect master patted her again. However, Meng Qi saved Chu Tianfeng and also saved you. In the future, you can't say those doubtful words to her again. Yes. Lu Qingran nodded. Disciple was rash before. You can't be blamed. The sect master smiled slightly. You were too concerned about fellow Daoist Chu, and your worry made you confused. Master. Lu Qingran pouted coquettishly and leaned into the sect master's arms. Her starry eyes were like light, and the tall figure of the black-clothed young man seemed to appear in front of her again. This was all the male disciples of Cool Breeze Valley. It was the handsome young man she had never seen since she was a child. And he was so strong, so careful to protect her. When she was protected in his arms, although the demonic creature was beside them, Lu Qingran was more shy and excited than scared. She just didn't know. Lu Qingran's eyes flashed slightly. Junior Martial Sister Meng Qi always looked cold. But there were also a lot of male disciples who liked her in the sect. She was so powerful that she could even detoxify Chu Tianfeng. Tianfeng would also care about and be very grateful to her. Meng Qi was completely unaware of this. After she left Lu Qingran's room, she walked towards the cold pond at the top of the mountain without saying a word. Although the Cool Breeze Valley sect was small, it was still considered a cultivation sect. There were more than 100 disciples, elders, deacons, and so on. The disciples she met on the way had heard a lot of rumors about this junior martial sister Meng Qi in the sect these days. At this time, they saw Meng Qi come back and walk out of Lu Qingran's room so calmly. Many people couldn't help but look at her curiously. But they immediately saw that the person walking behind Meng Qi was the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace. Those who were curious to see the gossip looked over. The first person they met was not Meng Qi, but Chu Tianfeng, who was walking behind her. The black-clothed young man's gaze was very cold as he proudly swept his gaze over those disciples. None of the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley dared to look at him. Although this person was injured and poisoned, and it was said that his cultivation realm was also suppressed. But he was the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace after all. He was young, but he was almost on par with the sect master of Cool Breeze Valley. Everyone who wanted to watch a good show was forced back by Chu Tianfeng's gaze. Everything seemed so calm. As Meng Qi walked, she simply took out a small bamboo slip from the space in her bracelet. This was the herbal records of the sect that she borrowed from Elder Yang before she went to pick herbs. Meng Qi had also learned this book in her previous life. It recorded the medicinal properties of the herbs left behind by the sect masters of Cool Breeze Valley. After she left Cool Breeze Valley, she met her teacher. She learned a lot of principles from him. At that time, she gradually had the principle that everything should not be so strictly divided into levels. She began to pay attention to many low-level medicines. When she read this book in the past, she ignored a lot of problems. After her rebirth, her previous contribution points couldn't be exchanged for it for the time being. This time, it was just enough. Since she was going to pick herbs again, Meng Qi went to exchange for it and prepared to study it carefully. She didn't notice the attitude of the surrounding disciples. She didn't know that after the two of them left, those disciples who were shocked by Chu Tianfeng looked at each other blankly. Why did they feel that something was wrong? Why did they feel that the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace was like junior sister Meng Qi's guard? This must be an illusion. They walked silently all the way to the edge of the cold pool. Meng Qi put away the bamboo slip of herbal records and turned to look at Chu Tianfeng. "Take off your clothes." Meng Qi still remembered that when she said the same thing that day, the young man was extremely proud. He sneered and looked at her with ridicule, disdain, and an indescribable playfulness. But now, the same words had just been said. Chu Tianfeng's face turned red immediately. He raised his hand to hold his belt and looked away. Can't I wear it?" "Meng Qi, it's not the first time, why are you suddenly shy?" Chapter 6. Meng Qi blinked her eyes, feeling that something was wrong. She thought for a moment and said, "The medicine this time will be charged separately." As expected, Chu Tianfeng's face darkened, and even his gaze became much dimmer. His hand on his belt fell. His long eyelashes also fell, covering the light in his eyes. "Okay," Chu Tianfeng said, his voice slightly hoarse. The color on his face just now was still there. But the black-clothed youth, who was still tall and straight just now, seemed a little discouraged, his head hanging down. Meng Qi relaxed and added, "Although Lu Qingran is my senior sister, she was injured because of you, so you should also pay for the medicine I gave her." As expected, Chu Tianfeng's face became even more gloomy. He suddenly raised his eyes to look at Meng Qi, and the girl's small figure was reflected in his pitch-black eyes. Her green robe was like a pine, and her hair was like ink. On the edge of the cold pond, Meng Qi stood prettily. Originally, in Chu Tianfeng's eyes, her face could only be called delicate and pretty. It seemed to have a bit more immortal aura. "Okay," he responded in a low voice. His tone was crisp, without the slightest hint of disdain or ridicule. Chu Tianfeng didn't even wait for Meng Qi to speak and added, "I don't have any spirit stones on me, so I can write an IOU for you first." Rice Ball reading after he finished speaking, he took out a bamboo slip. Clearly, a few days ago, he could have completely turned hostile, but he didn't mind writing it at all now. Chu Tianfeng held the bamboo slip and quickly finished writing. Then, he branded his spiritual sense imprint. This way, no matter where Meng Qi was taken, as long as there were disciples of Burning Sky Palace or places where Burning Sky Palace belonged, she could exchange for enough spirit stones. Meng Qi, the black-clothed youth, silently handed the bamboo slip to Meng Qi, and the space for the number of spirit stones was even blank. He obviously didn't care how much Meng Qi would fill in. For the young master of Burning Sky Palace, a bit of spirit stones was nothing at all. Moreover, Chu Tianfeng looked at Meng Qi and felt a little upset. His gaze gradually softened, and when he spoke again, his voice had also become gentle. "Let's begin," he said. "Thank you for your hard work. Meng Qi, it's okay. It's only right and proper to take money for treatment." She stared blankly as Chu Tianfeng took off his belt, revealing his tall and straight figure. The other party was very tall, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Other than the faint black gas seeping out of the wound on his shoulder, which looked a little terrifying. Chu Tianfeng was a true son of heaven. Everything was so perfect. He threw his outer robe on the ground and immersed himself in the cold pond. Meng Qi subconsciously reached out to touch his face. The cold pond was right beside her, and the clear water reflected her face. If he hadn't seen with his own eyes that her appearance hadn't changed, Meng Qi would have almost thought that she had possessed senior martial sister Lu Qingran. But it didn't matter anymore. Meng Qi shook her head. She had obviously successfully avoided the 3 months in prison. Even if Chu Tianfeng's attitude had changed, her method of cutting off karma was still very effective. Instead of wasting time to be entangled, it was better to seize the time to cultivate. Anyway, although things were a little strange, it didn't make much of a difference to her. As Meng Qi thought, she took out the herbs she had collected from her bracelet space and used the same method to cultivate the essence of the medicine. Then she turned and walked towards Chu Tianfeng. Her fingers were white and slender, like spring onions, and her nails were neatly trimmed. Meng Qi reached out and pressed on Chu Tianfeng's shoulder. During the last treatment, Chu Tianfeng didn't even bother to look at Meng Qi's appearance. At this time, the girl's slightly cold fingers with the smell of medicine were placed on his shoulder. Chu Tianfeng seemed to be scalded, and his shoulder subconsciously shrank. Then he felt the scorching medicinal smell seeping into the wound on his shoulder along Meng Qi's fingers. That warm feeling had a sense of familiarity that felt like a lifetime ago. It drove away the needle-like tingling pain in Chu Tianfeng's body, bringing a comfortable feeling of ironing. Meng Qi slowly closed her eyes. For her, this was also a form of cultivation. The two continued to repeat the process from a few days ago. But this time, her consumption was obviously greater. Often, in less than half an hour, she could only sit down and wait for her spiritual aura to recover. After exhausting all her spiritual aura once again, Meng Qi sat cross-legged by the cold pool. A fine layer of sweat had already soaked her forehead. Chu Tianfeng, who was soaking in the cold pool, looked up. Sunlight happened to shine on Meng Qi's face. This girl, who he had only thought of as delicate and pretty a few days ago. At this moment, even the fine beads of sweat on her smooth forehead looked exceptionally cute. Chu Tianfeng took a deep breath. Under the sunlight, the girl, dressed in a green robe, with black hair, snow-white skin, and bright eyes, seemed to float like an immortal. He watched without blinking as Meng Qi recovered her spiritual aura, stood up again, and staggered towards him. You. Chu Tianfeng hesitated. Rest for a while. It had been 2 days and 1 night since Meng Qi came back alone from picking herbs. Chu Tianfeng could see that Meng Qi was almost exhausted. I'm fine. Meng Qi shook her head. She narrowed her eyes. Although she looked very tired, the spiritual aura in her body was actually very abundant. In her eyes, Chu Tianfeng was not a genius young cultivator of Burning Sky Palace at all. He was a large human-shaped experience pill. Her hard work these past few days had not been in vain. After entering the 9th realm from the 8th realm of Qi refining, she was now almost at the 9th realm. Her clear wind technique had also improved a lot. Now she only felt that breathing was exceptionally refreshing. When the last wisp of green light brushed past Chu Tianfeng's shoulder, the originally hideous black wound completely disappeared. His shoulder returned to normal. The young man's healthy wheat-colored skin, stained with a few drops of cold pond water, was full of youthful vitality. Meng Qi exhaled, and her entire body fell backwards. Careful. Chu Tianfeng flew up. He didn't care that he was covered in cold pond water, and stretched out his arms to support Meng Qi. The girl's slender body fell into the crook of his arm, and her soft and slightly cool black hair brushed past Chu Tianfeng's chin. His heart suddenly moved. Meng Qi had already pushed him away and stood up straight. I'm fine. She shook her head. She had made sufficient preparations. Although she was still so tired that she almost fainted, she still had a breath left and could barely stay awake. Meng Qi sat cross-legged, decisively refusing Chu Tianfeng's help, and sat down cross-legged. For 2 days and 2 nights, she almost didn't sleep at all. Her spiritual aura was exhausted and recovered, and she kept repeating this boring process. But the help was obviously also huge. Meng Qi took out a pill from her bracelet storage bag and stuffed it into her mouth. Her spiritual aura flowed along her meridians and quickly filled her whole body. After a long while, she opened her eyes. Satisfied, she stood up and stretched her body. Her. Meng Qi turned around, about to return to the sect. Unexpectedly, she met a pair of black eyes. Why haven't you left yet? She looked at Chu Tianfeng, who was only a few steps away from her. The black-clothed youth had already put on his clothes. The paleness on his face when he was injured and poisoned a few days ago had been swept away. His suppressed realm had recovered, and his whole person looked much more upright. Chu Tianfeng had a lot to say. But Meng Qi obviously didn't want to get a reply from him. After asking, she brushed past him. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. Goodbye. Chu Tianfeng, Meng Qi. He quickly followed her. I have something to say to you. Why did you? He had a lot of questions to ask her, and a lot of things to tell her. Chu Tianfeng had just started talking when two slender figures in the distance gradually approached and quickly swept in front of them. Fellow Daoist Chu. The one in front was the sect master of Cool Breeze Valley, and beside her was Lu Qingran. The girl's glistening eyes were still slightly red, and as soon as she saw Chu Tianfeng, her gaze was glued to him. Tianfeng, is your poison okay? Yes. Chu Tianfeng responded faintly. That's great. Lu Qingran smiled brightly. She was also very good-looking, and when she smiled, even the surroundings of the cold pond became warm and harmonious, as if flowers had bloomed in spring. Thank you, Junior Marshal Sister Meng. Lu Qingran looked at Meng Qi. She cupped her hands and bowed. I was too worried about Tianfeng that day, so I wronged Junior Marshal Sister. I hope Junior Marshal Sister won't take offense. Senior Marshal Sister Lu is too polite. Meng Qi returned the bow. She moved a few steps away as if nothing had happened. Next would be the invasion of the Yarrow realm. But with Chu Tianfeng here, nothing would happen to Cool Breeze Valley. Then this time, the chaos shouldn't last that long. Meng Qi silently calculated in her heart. After solving the invasion of the Yarrow realm, Cool Breeze Valley would be absorbed into Burning Heaven Palace. At that time, for safety, except for a few disciples who didn't want to travel long distances, the entire Cool Breeze Valley would move to where Burning Heaven Palace was. Cool Breeze Valley was originally at the edge of the eastern border of the 3,000 Worlds, not far from the boundary between the Yarrow and Mo realms. Burning Heaven Palace's Burning City was the largest city in the western border of the eastern border. But the western border where Burning City was located was the border between the eastern border and the western border. Meng Qi calculated. From here to Burning City, she needed to go west. For a Lianqi Xiuzhe like her, even if she could use the teleportation formations of various cities, it would take about 20 days to get there. The road wasn't safe either. With her current cultivation, it was obviously very difficult to go to the western border. But she could follow the people of Cool Breeze Valley to Burning City, and then find a way to go to the western border. It's decided. Before leaving, before the Yarrow realm invaded, Meng Qi decided to take advantage of the time to do a few things. Thinking of this, she bowed to the sect leader. Sect leader, this disciple has something to do and will leave first. After Meng Qi finished speaking, she nodded politely at Lu Qingran, turned and strode down the mountain. She didn't listen to what the three people said at all. Anyway, it was just Chu Tianfeng and Lu Qingran whispering sweet nothings to each other after parting in life and death. So Meng Qi also didn't notice. Behind her, Chu Tianfeng's eyes suddenly darkened. Meng Shamai seems to still be angry with me. Lu Qingran sighed softly and said faintly, I really went too far before, I should have asked about the situation first. Especially when she saved me, she said, shuddering slightly. This place was very close to the cold pond, and Lu Qingran's Juji cultivation couldn't resist the bone-chilling cold. Chu Tianfeng acted as if he didn't see it at all. I've already contacted my martial uncle, he will bring people over as soon as possible. He looked at Meng Qi's back that had already disappeared into the distance and said somewhat anxiously, I also have something to do, I'll leave first. After saying that, he chased after Meng Qi without hesitation. Chu Tianfeng didn't follow closely. Not long after he left the cold pond, he saw Meng Qi's thin and slender back. She walked in the clouds on the mountain peak, appearing and disappearing. Meng Qi's steps were light and quick, and it was obvious that she was in a good mood. Chu Tianfeng had already recovered his cultivation. He was a Jindan cultivator following behind Meng Qi. If he didn't want to be discovered by her, she wouldn't be able to detect his existence. Meng Qi quickly left Cool Breeze Valley. If she remembered correctly, after leaving this time, the next time she came back here, it would be a disaster. Many flowers and trees would be destroyed. In the mountain range not far from Coolbreeze Valley, there were ling grasses that only grew here. The ling grasses were only second grade and had many uses. Meng Qi planned to take some away before the chaos. She quickly entered the mountain range. Meng Qi had only come here once before, and wasn't very familiar with the path. However, this place wasn't very far from Coolbreeze Valley, and was far away from the Yarrow and Mo territories. Relatively speaking, it was much safer. She walked quickly along the path in her memory. Chu Tianfeng followed her from a distance. Seeing the indigo figure walk forward without looking back, he felt slightly uncomfortable. Meng Qi, did she know? He knew everything. He already, Chem? Meng Qi suddenly stopped walking. Chu Tianfeng hurriedly hid his figure. At this time, Meng Qi was at the border between two mountains. Between the crevices of the mountains, there was a small valley. A small forest covered the valley, and only the shadows of the trees could be seen. Meng Qi took a deep breath. She was a medical cultivator, and her sense of smell was far better than that of ordinary people. There was a faint smell of blood in the wind, and it didn't seem to be the smell of human blood. The smell was quite strong, and there was also a faint demonic aura. Meng Qi hesitated. That valley was her destination this time. The second-grade ling grasses she was going to pick were in the valley. Should she go in? She had never been a reckless person, and would never put herself in danger for a few ling grasses. Logically speaking, the Yarrow realm hadn't invaded yet, and this place wasn't far from Coolbreeze Valley, so it should be relatively safe now. She slowed down, made a spell with her left hand, and walked slowly towards the valley with light steps. If it was really something dangerous, it would be too late for her to escape now. Meng Qi thought for a moment, and took out a bamboo slip from her bracelet storage bag. This was a one-time spell, and there was an escape spell attached to it, which could let her teleport to any place 100 miles away in an instant. This was also a life-saving magic weapon given to her by Elder Yang in the sect. She walked lightly, and slowly passed through the small forest. The valley was just behind the forest. Meng Qi walked out of the forest, and could already see the situation inside. The ling grasses she needed were on the cliff next to her, lush and green. At the bottom of the cliff, the grass was crushed. A small white shadow was lying on top of it. Huh! Meng Qi was stunned. The white shadow heard the footsteps, and seemed to want to stand up. But it was too injured, and just moved. It lay down weakly. Oh, it turned its head with difficulty to look in the direction of Meng Qi, and let out a full, soft, and even a little coquettish howl. Meng Qi was caught off guard, and met a pair of blue eyes. Oh, when the little thing saw Meng Qi, it cried even more fiercely. It was just that its voice was weak, and it sounded like it was injured. Or, it was starving. Meng Qi's ears were filled with the other party's coquettish and non-threatening howl. In front of her was fluffy and soft white fur. As the other party moved, the two small semicircular ears on the top of its head were still trembling slightly. So cute. Was it, the little white tiger? The little guy had a pair of small semicircular ears. Her clear blue eyes were even brighter than gems. Its whole body was covered in soft white fur, and there were a few black king patterns on its forehead. Obviously, it was a little white tiger that was not yet an adult. Meng Qi subconsciously lightened her footsteps and slowly walked towards the little guy. Oh, the little white tiger saw her approaching and cried even more energetically. It even raised its little paws and waved them fiercely. Meng Qi was not afraid of it. She had already walked to the little white tiger's side and looked around. This did not look like an ordinary white tiger from the Trichilia chasm. The other party's eyes were too beautiful, and the shape of the Big Dipper was faintly imprinted in its blue eyes. This was clearly an injured white tiger little demon beast. Meng Qi hesitated. Although she had never been to the demon realm, she knew that the powerful demons there were the heaven demons that the demon cultivators talked about. They all had beast forms. She remembered that among senior sister Lu Qingrant's suitors, there was a noble heaven demon from the demon realm. Its original form was a white fox. Meng Qi had never interacted with the other party, but she knew that the White Fox clan was a noble in the demon realm. That young white fox was also very powerful. According to the human cultivation levels in the trichiliachasm, at that time, it was already equivalent to a nascent soul cultivator that was a realm higher than Chu Tianfeng's golden core stage. Although the little guy in front of her looked very young, who knew if it would have any karma with senior sister Lu Qingran in the future? Oh, the little white tiger was still crying out non-stop. Some kind of Big Dipper flashed, as if it wanted to attract the starlight in the sky. But it was probably injured. Its blue eyes flickered twice and quickly dimmed. Even its cries became weak and seemed even more delicate. So cute. Meng Qi's heart skipped a beat. And she looked at the injured little white tiger. It was seriously injured. Other than that, it should have been injured by the barrier between the trichiliachasm and the demon realm. She wanted to save it. Meng Qi's fingers that were hanging by her side moved slightly. Just like how sword cultivators and dharma cultivators would be tempted when they saw powerful sword techniques or dharma spells. As a medical cultivator and obsessed with medical skills, Meng Qi could not help but be tempted when she encountered any difficult and complicated diseases, strange poisons, or injuries that she had never seen before. But she hesitated for a moment and squatted down. She reached out to the little white tiger. Oh, the little white tiger wanted to run, but Meng Qi pressed down on its neck. Let me see. As she spoke, she grabbed the little white tiger and turned it over, revealing its soft and furry stomach. Meng Qi reached out. Under the shocked and complicated gaze of the blue eyes, her slender and cold fingers moved down. Oh, the little white tiger's fur instantly stood up, and even its tail stood up. Meng Qi's disappointment was obvious. It's a little male tiger. Chapter 7. Little White Tiger. It instinctively reached out and hugged Meng Qi's hand with its 4 white furry paws. Its paws were not aggressive, and its soft paws pressed against her wrist. Meng Qi smiled and rubbed its stomach again. Then, she let go of its hand and stood up. The little white tiger was small and looked like a child. Its furry stomach was revealed when she flipped it over. And it was, at this moment, the tiger was probably shocked. Its fur stood on end and then fell limp. Its blue eyes stared at Meng Qi. In the depths of its ocean-like eyes, the silver stars in the shape of the Big Dipper were faintly discernible. Meng Qi was not entirely trying to find out the other party's gender. When she grabbed the little white tiger, she had already cast a spell to check its body. It was very complicated. Except for the obvious injuries caused by demonic arts. There seemed to be a power in its body that Meng Qi had never come into contact with. Mysterious and powerful. The spell she used to check the other party's condition was completely devoured the moment she touched it. Nothing was left. Besides that, Meng Qi faintly felt that there seemed to be a star map flashing in the other party's body. When her spirit energy entered the other party's body, it was like entering a vast starry sky. There were countless stars twinkling in the darkness, mysterious and strange. Meng Qi frowned slightly. Even before her rebirth, her medical skills had already reached the threshold of 5th grade, but she still found it very troublesome. Meng Qi glanced at the other party's left front paw. That was the other party's only obvious external injury. It seemed to be caused by something extremely sharp. Even now, blood was still seeping out. Meng Qi did not know anything about demon cultivators. This little white tiger looked weak and cute, but its injuries were so complicated. No wonder it could only lie on the ground and could not struggle against her. It looked weak, pitiful, helpless, and especially cute. Little guy. Meng Qi hesitated. She had many herbs in her bracelet space. Meng Qi bent down and gently held the little white tiger's front paw to examine it carefully. This is. She frowned slightly. The wound was obviously not as simple as being cut by a sharp object. Otherwise, given how small the wound was, the bleeding would have stopped long ago. He wanted to cure it. He had never seen such a complicated internal and external injury. There seemed to be internal injuries left behind by demonic arts, external injuries left behind by poisoned sharp weapons, the influence of spirit formation power, and that mysterious power. Even the spiritual energy in the little white tiger's body was stirred into a mess. He wanted to give it a try. He wanted to cure it. Meng Qi couldn't help but curl his fingers slightly. But it was a little male tiger. She didn't remember that Lu Qingran had such a little white tiger by her side. She also didn't remember that she knew other demon cultivators besides that white fox demon cultivator. What if? Meng Qi hesitated. She coughed lightly. You're still young, right? Little guy. Roar. The little white tiger cried out weakly. He seemed to still be in a daze. In his azure eyes, the Big Dipper stars were still faintly discernible. Meng Qi reminded her. Is she 1 year old? The azure blue eyes seemed to flicker slightly. Do you understand? Meng Qi didn't find it strange. She had never been to the demon realm, but she knew that the great sky demons in the demon realm were very powerful. Even someone as powerful as his esteemed teacher seemed unfathomable when he mentioned it. Meng Qi looked at the little white tiger and reminded him. Are you 1 year old? The little white tiger cried out softly. It was unknown whether it was denying or admitting it. You're still young. Meng Qi took it as a confirmation. In the future, when you meet the cultivator sisters from the 3,000 worlds, remember to stay away. They are very scary. Hearing this, the little white tiger only glanced at Meng Qi weakly. A trace of indifference flashed through his azure blue eyes. He already knew. The scariest woman he had ever met in his life was right in front of him. Just now, the other party. Whenever he thought of what happened just now, the little white tiger would explode again. He had never been treated like this before. From. Came. Did. Have. Meng Qi had already squatted down happily and reached out to hold the little white tiger's left front paw again. She made a hand seal with her right hand, and a pale green light fell on the other party's wound. Although she was only using the simplest rejuvenation art, she had also cultivated it to the 4th realm. However, when the light fell, blood still seeped out of the wound. Countless records flashed through Meng Qi's mind. In her previous life, she had already entered the threshold of a 5th grade medical skill. Even in the 3,000 worlds, she was a rather famous medical cultivator. She wasn't a disciple of a famous sect, nor was she from a small sect like the Cool Breeze Valley. She walked on the path of medical skills step by step and was extremely steady. She was even more knowledgeable than medical cultivators of the same level nurtured by many large sects. But now, even Meng Qi couldn't tell what sharp weapon had injured the little white tiger's wound. It seemed to be poisonous. It wasn't just poison. There were also effects of talismans and boundary powers. The sharp weapon that had injured him should be very special. Meng Qi frowned and instinctively tilted her head slightly. Coincidentally, the little white tiger also turned to look at her. It seemed to have finally completely awakened from the huge and shocking impact just now. Its azure blue eyes looked straight into Meng Qi's eyes, and the Big Dipper stars flashed. There seemed to be starlight flashing across its eyes, but it quickly dimmed again. Be careful. A young man's voice suddenly sounded behind Meng Qi. In the next instant, the black-robed youth appeared beside her. Chu Tianfeng bent over and pulled Meng Qi up. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and made a hand seal. Flames instantly soared into the sky, separating Meng Qi and the still immobile little white tiger. Young Palace Master Chu? Meng Qi staggered from his pull. She looked at the black-robed youth who suddenly appeared beside her. You, Chu Tianfeng stood in front of Meng Qi, still looking at the little white tiger in front of him warily. This is a demon beast. His voice was very cold. These 4 words were almost squeezed out from between his teeth, revealing a bone-chilling coldness. Chu Tianfeng wasn't close just now, but it was enough for him to see what Meng Qi did. He was angry and amused at the same time. He instinctively lowered his gaze and looked at Meng Qi's slender fingers. Just now, Chu Tianfeng suddenly retracted his gaze, and a trace of surprise appeared on his originally cold face. Little white tiger. Meng Qi also noticed Chu Tianfeng's wariness. She was probably rash just now. Meng Qi was never someone who pretended to know when she didn't know. She immediately asked politely, Young Palace Master Chu, is this little white tiger very powerful? Chu Tianfeng took a deep breath. He made another hand seal. Burning Sky Palace was a large sect of cultivators, and the power to control fire was absolute. The pale blue flames formed a circle, encircling the little white tiger, who was completely unable to move at all. Chu Tianfeng then said, "Do you know the demon realm?" "Yes." Meng Qi nodded. Cool Breeze Valley is at the intersection of the demon realm, and the 3,000 worlds. Chu Tianfeng said, "The barrier separates the human and demon realms, but occasionally there are escaping demons that enter the 3,000 worlds." He said, "But they are nothing to be afraid of." As soon as these words came out, Chu Tianfeng immediately thought of how badly he had been injured by the demons earlier. His face turned red again, and he looked at the girl in front of him with some annoyance. Fortunately, Meng Qi only nodded. "I know. The demon realm is dominated by demon cultivators, and compared to human cultivators, their cultivation methods are different. Great demons, which are the sky demons that demon cultivators call them, often have the shadow of stars on their bodies, and can use the starlight to cultivate." As Chu Tianfeng spoke, he turned to look at the little white tiger trapped in his flames. The White Tiger clan is the king among the sky demons. Meng Qi, she really didn't know before. She had only heard the cultivators she had treated mention that the ranks of demon cultivators were more distinct than in the 3,000 worlds. Great demon cultivators might be very powerful when they were born. Especially the nobles among the sky demons. For example, the white fox that adored Lu Qingran was said to be a great noble among the sky demons. Her status was noble, her status was respected, and she was very powerful. Chu Tianfeng seemed to be worried that she wouldn't believe him. He raised his left hand, and a red flame ignited in his palm. The flame grew higher and larger, until it became a curtain as tall as 2 people and as wide as the curtain. The flame continued to jump. Slowly, there seemed to be some images forming inside, and they became clearer and clearer. Meng Qi was not unfamiliar with this. She had seen the disciples of Burning Sky Palace use this spell to learn spells. She also knew that this was a secret manual unique to Burning Sky Palace, similar to bamboo slips and jade slips, and could be used to record spells or important matters. Meng Qi even knew that using this kind of spell to record things was a very important secret of Burning Sky Palace. She turned to look at Chu Tianfeng in surprise. The black-robed youth looked ahead attentively and said indifferently, "In the past 100 years, the demon realm has broken into the realm from time to time, and the barrier of the 3,000 worlds has become more and more unstable. My father and the elders in the sect have long been worried about the demon realm and the demon realm." This is the scene recorded by a spirit-severing stage elder in the sect, who gave up a major realm and sent his spirit into the demon realm. As Chu Tianfeng spoke, his gaze swept over the little white tiger lying on the ground. His gaze was cold as he looked at the little white tiger coldly. As the flames jumped, the scene gradually became clearer. Green mountains rose and fell, and mountains were stacked on top of each other. It was a magnificent world that Meng Qi had never seen before, and it did not lose out to the 3,000 worlds where human cultivators lived. The scene gradually zoomed in, and those tall trees also became clearer and clearer. High mountains and valleys, waterfalls and flowing light, and the scenery was magnificent and beautiful. The little white tiger lying at the side narrowed its eyes slightly. Its azure blue gaze swept over Chu Tianfeng, and its eyes were filled with a coldness that was completely inconsistent with his cute and naive appearance. When in the curtain of flame, the picturesque scene was suddenly destroyed. A Xiuzhe dressed in black flew into the air. "This is an elder of the sect," Chu Tianfeng said. Meng Qi nodded. A spirit-severing stage powerhouse, even in the 3,000 worlds, was a very powerful person. Lianqi, Zhuji, Jindan, Yuanying, and then spirit-severing. The further one went, the harder it was. Some people could not go from Yuanying to spirit-severing in their entire lives. It was not a coincidence that Burning Sky Palace was ranked in the top 10 of the Eastern Jie sects. Except for the fact that there was such a powerful person in the sect. Such a powerful person was willing to sacrifice a major realm just to gather information about the demon realm. He had great foresight. In the scene, the elder of Burning Sky Palace seemed to be fleeing. A spirit-severing stage powerhouse, even if it was just a clone that entered the demon realm, was equivalent to a Yuanying Xiuzhe. He was actually Fleeing? His speed was very fast, like a gust of wind, and he left the mountain range behind him in an instant. The elder of Burning Sky Palace even looked a bit disheveled. The curtain of light in the flames suddenly flashed, and another white figure appeared. A moment ago, the figure was clearly a bit far away. But in the blink of an eye, Meng Qi seemed to have appeared beside the elder of Burning Sky Palace. Compared to the elder who was desperately fleeing, and even looked a bit disheveled, he seemed incomparably leisurely. As he got closer, Meng Qi could see more clearly. The other was wearing a white robe, his long black hair hanging over his shoulders. Every step he took, it was as if he was taking a stroll, lazy and leisurely. But the elder of Burning Sky Palace, who was equivalent to a Yuanying Shouja, was unable to shake him off even if he tried his best. The white-clothed man was unhurried, like a cat that had caught its prey, and was playing with his prey with great interest. He seemed to feel that there was a spell recording everything, and suddenly turned his head lazily, looking in the direction of Meng Qi and the others. "Ah!" Meng Qi exclaimed completely subconsciously. On the flickering curtain of light was a perfect face. Even in the 3,000 worlds, where there was no lack of beauties, it was very beautiful. The most important thing was, it is said that this is true Lord White Tiger of the Demon Realm, the most powerful of this generation of the White Tiger clan of the Sky Demon Realm. Chu Tianfeng subconsciously clenched his hands that were hanging by his side. The flames made his eyes a little red, and his eyes flashed with excitement. "One day, I will defeat him, true Lord White Tiger," Meng Qi murmured, repeating in his heart. Burning Sky Palace must have made a mistake. This person, that familiar face, even if she had seen it for 3 years, she would still be amazed by it. That lazy expression, as if he didn't care about anything. Was it her esteemed teacher? Chapter 8. The white-robed man in the curtain of flame glanced indifferently in the direction of Meng Qi and the others. The corners of his lips rose slightly, and his long eyebrows raised slightly. He looked like he was smiling but not. He seemed to know what the Shouja of Burning Sky Palace in front of him was doing, but did not care at all. Meng Qi looked dazedly at the man. His appearance and demeanor were a bit similar, but also a bit different. Facial features. Meng Qi's gaze slowly traced the other's brows and eyes. Very similar. His demeanor was also so lazy. But this true Lord White Tiger's gaze was too indifferent. It was like the waterfall that flashed by in the picture just now, cold and emotionless. Her teacher was different. Even with such a lazy smile, the gaze he looked at her with was warm. Bright and warm. Like the bright stars in the night sky. Like the warm sunshine in spring. He was also the best person Meng Qi had ever seen. Before she could finish the thought in her mind, she saw a change in the flame light screen. He probably knew that he could not outrun the white-robed man. The elder of Burning Sky Palace suddenly stopped in his tracks. Burning Sky Palace was a large sect of cultivators, and the elder himself had entered the stage of spirit severing. Even if it was a wisp of his primordial spirit, it was equivalent to a Yuanying Shouja. That was a Shouja far more powerful than the sect leader of Cool Breeze Valley. His hands moved quickly. In the blink of an eye, blazing flames covered the sky and covered the earth. Meng Qi's eyes widened. It was not that she had never seen the power of a Yuanying Shouja, but this kind of fire that seemed to be able to swallow everything was still shocking. Chu Tianfeng clenched his fists in excitement. This is one of the 3 great forbidden spells of the sect, Blazing Flame Red Lotus, he said to Meng Qi in a low voice. When cultivated to Realm 9, it can destroy the world and burn everything in the world. Even a Darching Shouja will have their spirit energy consumed, and if they do not die, they will drop a great realm. Rice Ball Red. Realm 9, Meng Qi glanced indifferently at Chu Tianfeng. The so-called forbidden spells were not spells that were forbidden. Indeed, it was too powerful and consumed too much spiritual qi. For example, if a Yuanying Shouja used a Realm 4 forbidden spell, they would basically use up all their Ling energy after one use. Moreover, its destructive power was astonishing. Just as Chu Tianfeng said, the forbidden technique of a big sect like the Burning Heaven Palace, if it was really practiced to the 9th realm, then it would make them suffer when facing a Darching stage cultivator of the same level. Sometimes, even the caster would not be able to fully control the spell. That was why this type of spell was known as a forbidden spell. It was to warn the disciples not to use it carelessly. Here was the problem. If he wanted to raise the level of his techniques, he would have to use them repeatedly. He couldn't use this kind of technique that would exhaust his spiritual energy easily. It was easier said than done to reach the 9th level. Meng Qi himself was not a fan of such a powerful spell. Especially after being influenced by his teacher, he felt that even low-level herbs and spells had a powerful side. She didn't say anything and focused on the flame screen. The flames that blotted out the sky and covered the earth were surging. The white-robed man still looked indifferent. The Burning Heaven Palace elder turned around and smiled coldly at the other. The flames burned in front of him towards the white-robed man and were about to burn the other's long robes. The white-robed man finally moved. He waved his long sleeve, and a light blue light sprayed out. With a casual movement, the flames that blotted out the sky and earth were instantly extinguished. With a lazy chuckle, the white-robed man took another step forward. It was not earth-shattering. He seemed to just reach out a hand and lightly tap. The world seemed to split open. The avatar of the Burning Heaven Palace elder suddenly gave a scream. The black figure was cut in half at the waist by something unknown. A wind blew and turned to nothingness. The white-robed man waved his sleeve and lazily glanced in the direction of Meng Qi and the others. He should know that the Burning Heaven Palace elder was recording all of this, but he didn't care at all. He stepped forward. His movements were not fast as he disappeared into the mountains and rivers. Not a single trace was left behind between heaven and earth, as if everything that had just happened had never happened. The flame screen slowly disappeared. Meng Qi and Chu Tianfeng didn't speak first. After a long time, she slowly exhaled. She was a medical cultivator and also a cultivator. The battle just now ended too quickly. It even made people have a feeling of it ended just like that. What happened just now? Thinking back carefully. Although the avatar of the Burning Heaven Palace elder was only at the nascent soul stage, it was still at the nascent soul stage. It was a realm that no one in the 100 years of history of Cool Breeze Valley could reach except for the founder who founded the sect. Before Meng Qi died in her previous life, she was at the Golden Core stage. That was because she met her teacher. Otherwise, she would probably stay at the Foundation establishment stage for a few more years. But just now, the white-robed man had casually turned a nascent soul cultivator into ashes without being able to fight back. It was really too powerful. Her teacher shouldn't be so powerful, right? Meng Qi blinked, and the white tiger perfected lord that Chu Tianfeng mentioned just now appeared in her mind. Was this the king of the demon realm's heavenly demons? Then this little white tiger, was it also so powerful? Meng Qi turned to look at the little white tiger. The little guy seemed to know that it couldn't escape due to its serious injuries. It simply gave up struggling and lazily lay on the grass. Blood was still seeping out of the wound on its front paws, but it didn't care. A pair of azure blue eyes quietly stared at Meng Qi. The Big Dipper star was faintly discernible in its eyes, as if it was floating in the sea of stars. Did you see it? Chu Tianfeng said in a deep voice. How powerful is the White Tiger clan? He said, the avatar of my Burning Heaven Palace elder was destroyed by him in one move. He was also seriously injured and directly fell to the spirit severing stage. He is still in seclusion to heal his injuries. So, Chu Tianfeng looked at the little white tiger coldly. It can't be saved. His voice finally attracted the little white tiger's attention. He glanced at Chu Tianfeng lazily. Although it was small and cute, it still looked like a fluffy little white tiger. But that careless and indifferent expression was really a bit like the white tiger perfected lord in the light screen just now. Chu Tianfeng's hands, which were hanging by his side, suddenly clenched tightly. He had a feeling of being despised. Chu Tianfeng took a deep breath and strode towards the little white tiger. Wait! Meng Qi's figure flashed and blocked in front of the little white tiger. Young Palace Master Chu just said that this was the scene recorded by your sect's elder when he went deep into the demon realm. She looked at Chu Tianfeng and asked. Yes. Then, Is there a record of their clan entering the Trichilia chasm to hurt people? Meng Qi asked again. You want to save him? Chu Tianfeng didn't answer Meng Qi's question and directly asked. He was surprised to see Meng Qi blocking in front of the little white tiger. But he quickly smiled bitterly and muttered in a low voice, I should have thought of it. You were originally like this. I want to save him, Meng Qi said clearly. In fact, Meng Qi wasn't sure whether the man in the image was her teacher or not. But her teacher was a celestial being, and there weren't many people in the Trichilia chasm who could be as beautiful as him. To be so similar, even if it wasn't him, the two of them must be related. So she wanted to save the little white tiger. She must save it. Countless thoughts flashed through Meng Qi's mind as she looked at Chu Tianfeng's changing expression. This fellow's sect's elder's soul clone was destroyed by the white tiger perfected lord, and his realm fell. He was still recuperating now and definitely wouldn't let it go. Moreover, the other party had already recovered his realm, and even 10 of her were not his match. Only, Meng Qi bent her hand and took out a small pill from her storage bracelet. She squeezed the pill hard, and a colorless and odorless medicinal aura was instantly released. She had prepared this for self-defense. Although it wasn't a high-grade pill, it could seal a spell that could make people feel weak all over. It was effective on cultivators below the golden core stage, but for golden core cultivators, they might recover in at most 5 minutes. Meng Qi. Chu Tianfeng wanted to persuade Meng Qi. As soon as he opened his mouth, he felt his whole body go limp, and he couldn't even stand. He fell to the ground dispiritedly. You. Chu Tianfeng lay on the ground and looked up in disbelief at Meng Qi, who was walking quickly in front of him. He wanted to explain that he wouldn't harm Meng Qi. He couldn't even bear to say a harsh word to her now. He was just worried that this little demon tiger would harm Meng Qi. As soon as Chu Tianfeng opened his mouth, a small silver knife appeared in front of him. The tip of the knife flashed with a cold light and was extremely sharp. This was a weapon that Meng Qi had made for her. It was very simple, and its level wasn't high. It couldn't be helped. Her teacher was an almighty blacksmith, and she had only followed him for a short period of time, so she only learned a little. Make a soul oath. Meng Qi narrowed her eyes and looked at Chu Tianfeng. There's poison on the medicine knife, and it hurt your eyes. Even with the help of the experts of Burning Sky Palace, it will be difficult for you to recover your sight before you enter the spirit-severing stage. She wasn't lying. This small medicine knife, which was only 2nd grade, was the proud work of her teacher. Meng Qi was only at the golden core stage at that time, and her life bond weapon had to be made by herself in order to be connected to her mind. In order to let her have a suitable life bond weapon, the other party racked his brains and finally made Meng Qi forge this small medicine knife himself. Although it was only 2nd grade now. However, it could continue to level up as her cultivation and medical skills increased. According to the plan of that almighty blacksmith, when Meng Qi really could break through 9th grade, her medical skills would enter the legendary profound heaven-earth realm. Then this medicine knife should also become the life bond weapon of a righteous god, and its power would be great. Now, it was still very useful to threaten a young golden core cultivator who had just been injured and was recovering. Meng Qi's slender fingers held the small silver medicine knife and steadily faced Chu Tianfeng's eyes. Her hand was very steady. Her gaze was calm and cold. Like the cold stars in the night sky, she looked at Chu Tianfeng without any warmth in her eyes. Chu Tianfeng looked into Meng Qi's eyes like this. He suddenly raised the corners of his lips. A strange look flashed across the young man's handsome face. Chu Tianfeng. He clasped the little finger of his right hand and placed it on his heart. I swear on my soul. Chu Tianfeng looked into Meng Qi's eyes and said slowly, word by word, Meng Qi did her best to save my life regardless of her own safety. In this life, Chu Tianfeng will be her servant and obey her orders. If I violate the oath, heaven and earth will not tolerate it. Chapter 9. Meng Qi. She just wanted him to swear that he would not betray the little white tiger. But before she could react, Chu Tianfeng's hand on his chest flashed with a faint red light. It instantly entered his body. Did he succeed in swearing? Meng Qi's first reaction was to look up at the sky, feeling that tribulation lightning would strike down in the next second. The heavenly Tao was going to protect its own daughter and punish her, a little cannon fodder. Fortunately, the sky was clear and there were no changes. Meng Qi's second reaction was to look suspiciously at Chu Tianfeng. This guy didn't want to not pay, right? But she quickly rejected this idea. The young palatial master of Burning Sky Palace was not reduced to the point of having to renege on a debt. She was going to faint. She just wanted Chu Tianfeng to swear on his soul not to reveal the little white tiger. Meng Qi refused to believe that this small medicine knife of his would have such a great deterrent force. It could make someone as proud as Chu Tianfeng bow his head. Moreover, Chu Tianfeng had already gently pushed away the silver medicine knife and slowly stood up. The medicine was limited. After all, he was a golden core cultivator and recovered very quickly. You. Meng Qi took a step back and distanced herself from him. You were joking just now, right? If she remembered correctly, what Chu Tianfeng said just now was, a great soul oath? Especially his last sentence that heaven and earth would not tolerate it. For the cultivators of the 3,000 worlds, it was equivalent to breaking the oath and giving up on cultivating the great Tao. Because their original cultivation realm would fall to the bottom, and they would be rejected by heaven and earth, unable to advance even an inch. Chu Tianfeng stood up straight. He looked up at Meng Qi, his black eyes like cold stars. His gaze was so deep that it was impossible to see what he was thinking. The youth raised his chin proudly. What do you think? I don't need such an oath. Meng Qi frowned and waved her hand, her face full of disdain. I just need you to swear that you won't tell anyone about the little white tiger. In fact, she had never really seen what the Great Soul Oath was. He only felt that since Chu Tianfeng could make such an oath so easily, the Burning Sky Palace should have a way to remove it. Otherwise, wouldn't their young palace master's life fall into the hands of an ordinary cultivator like him? Let's start over, Meng Qi said. Chu Tianfeng stared at Meng Qi without blinking. His face was slightly red. How can the Great Soul Oath be redone? Meng Qi, but I don't need it. She looked at Chu Tianfeng and took another step back. I just need you to swear that you won't tell anyone about the little white tiger. Meng Qi sounded sincere. Needless to say, Chu Tianfeng and Lu Qingran had a close relationship. Meng Qi didn't need such a troublesome and arrogant young man to follow him around. Without the restriction of the Great Soul Oath, I would have spoken of today's matter, Chu Tianfeng suddenly said after a moment of silence. Tell everyone you see. His face flushed, and he continued to say, in less than 3 days, within a radius of 300 miles of Cool Breeze Valley, I guarantee that everyone will know that you picked up a little white tiger demonic beast. Meng Qi, Chu Tianfeng was a true proud son of heaven, and his cultivation talent was high. For as long as he could remember, wherever he went, he was held in the palm of everyone's hand. After he grew up, whether it was the disciples of the Burning Sky Palace or the young female cultivators he met while cultivating outside, they were generally willing to get close to him. Some of the bolder and more enthusiastic ones would even take the initiative to express their goodwill. Chu Tianfeng never thought that he would be despised like this one day when he took the initiative to make a great soul oath to someone else. He actually had to use such a shameless method to threaten the other party to make the other party reluctantly accept his oath. Chu Tianfeng's face was burning fiercely. But even though his face was red, the jar broke more and more. The oath has been made anyway, I can't remove it. If you have a way, you can remove it. Meng Qi, she stared at Chu Tianfeng without blinking. I don't have an order, and I won't have one in the future. You can leave. I'm not leaving. The corners of Chu Tianfeng's lips suddenly curled up. He felt as if he had found a way to deal with Meng Qi. If you leave, I'll tell others that you picked up a little white tiger demonic beast. Okay. Meng Qi waved her hand. If you want to stay, then stay. She never knew that the young master of the Burning Sky Palace could be so shameless. She endured it first. There must be a way to deal with this guy. The little white tiger's wound was still bleeding. She also didn't know what the relationship between this little guy and that powerful figure who was very much like her master was. But Meng Qi believed what Chu Tianfeng said. Although she didn't see it particularly clearly just now, when the white-robed man raised his hand to slaughter the elder of the Burning Sky Palace's avatar. She saw the Big Dipper flash in the depths of the other party's eyes. Meng-Chi took a deep breath and turned to walk towards the little white tiger. The little white tiger was still lying lazily on the grass. It could probably understand human language and had already given up struggling and running away. Meng-Chi was still holding the small silver medicine knife in one hand. Although this was something she had refined herself with her chi refinement cultivation after her rebirth, its grade was even lower than the one she had in her previous life. However, her mysterious teacher was a true expert in the field of artifact forging. Meng-Chi could only use a small part of the medicine knife's effect now, but it was also her best weapon for self-defense. Although Chu Tianfeng said that, she didn't completely let down her guard. The flames that had been blocking the little white tiger's surroundings had already been extinguished. Meng-Chi knelt on one knee and carefully placed the medicine knife beside the little white tiger. It was a place where she could easily reach with a finger. She faced Chu Tianfeng sideways and could see the other party's movements from the corner of her eye. Only then did she reach out to hold the little white tiger's injured paw again. This time, the other party didn't struggle and obediently placed its paw in her fair palm. The little white tiger's blue eyes stared at Meng-Chi for a moment and gently glanced at the silver medicine knife lying at the side. His eyes seemed to narrow slightly, but he quickly relaxed again. "Little guy." Meng-Chi took out a pill from her bracelet space and stuffed it into the little white tiger's mouth. "Your injury is very complicated. I may not be able to treat you for the time being." She touched the little white tiger's fluffy head. "But don't worry, I will definitely treat you." Meng-Chi's voice was soft and sweet to begin with. Even if she spoke very seriously, it was hard to be afraid. At this moment, her soft voice seemed to make the little white tiger more relaxed. Even Chu Tianfeng, who was standing at the side, felt a little upset when he heard this. "So during this period of time, you can hide the..." Meng-Chi casually drew the shape of a spoon. "Don't let others discover your identity." The little white tiger was actually not much different from the little tiger that could be a spirit beast for cultivators in the Trichiliocosm. It was just that the spirit beast tigers in the Trichiliocosm would not have the reflection of the Big Dipper in their eyes. Demon cultivators relied on the power of the stars to cultivate. The more powerful the demon cultivator, the more powerful the constellation shadows on their bodies were. The little white tiger's eyes dimmed slightly, probably because it understood Meng-Chi's words. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, his blue eyes seemed to have become deeper. His eyes were no longer as deep as before, and the original Big Dipper shadow in his eyes had been hidden. Chu Tianfeng walked over. He lowered his head and looked at the little demon beast with an unfriendly gaze. "I really can't feel any aura." His voice was deep. He knew that it was very difficult to stop Meng-Chi from treating the injured. This girl was obsessed with medical skills. It was one thing for her to be tempted when she encountered such a complicated injury. Most importantly, it was impossible for her to leave him in the lurch. Chu Tianfeng understood her very well. The little white tiger glanced at him lazily. Its gaze was indifferent. It was clearly a cute and fluffy little fellow. Chu Tianfeng saw disdain in those blue eyes. However, Meng-Chi had already bent down to pick up the little white tiger and kissed its semicircular fluffy little ear. So obedient. "Chu Tianfeng, I'll call you Little Chi for the time being." Meng-Chi continued, "Follow me for this period of time. When I find a way to cure you, you can go anywhere you want, okay?" The little white tiger's entire body froze. It had yet to recover from the kiss on its ear when its entire body was surrounded by a fresh medicinal fragrance. Fortunately, Meng-Chi did not intend to ask for a reply. She reached out and rubbed its fluffy little head. "Don't worry, I will definitely cure you." She hugged the little white tiger and comforted it, then looked up at the spirit herbs on the mountain wall. Meng-Chi carefully placed the little fellow back on the grass. Then, she went to collect a big bag of spirit herbs and specially left the seeds. When the time was right in the future, she could plant some. Chu Tianfeng watched her silently. It was only when Meng-Chi picked up the little white tiger again and walked back the way they came that he quickly followed. The two of them returned to Cool Breeze Valley in silence. At the entrance of Cool Breeze Valley, Lu Qingran had been waiting for a long time. When she saw Chu Tianfeng's figure finally appear, she hurriedly walked over to welcome him. Tianfeng. Lu Qingran was surprised to see that Chu Tianfeng had actually returned with Meng Qi. Junior sister Meng. She also nodded at Meng Qi. Senior sister Lu. Meng Qi responded calmly. This is. Lu Qingran's gaze was quickly attracted by the little white tiger. Just like any girl who saw a fluffy feline, her eyes lit up. So cute. Lu Qingran reached out to touch the little white tiger's head. Junior sister Meng, is this the spirit beast that you just caught? Is it the little tiger? It's really cute. Meng Qi instinctively took a step back, not wanting her senior sister to touch her little white tiger. Ah! Lu Qingran was a little hurt. Junior sister, can you let me touch it? It's really so cute. Tianfeng. As she spoke, she turned to look at Chu Tianfeng. Is it the little spirit pet that you helped junior sister Meng catch? There were many cultivators who raised spirit beasts as spirit pets in the 3000 worlds, but most of them were at the stage of golden core and above. Spirit beasts were not ordinary creatures. Cultivators at the stages of chi refinement and foundation establishment might not even be able to catch up to them. Even if they caught up, they would not be their match, let alone catch them. Lu Qingran naturally felt that it must be Chu Tianfeng's help that Meng Qi could catch this cute little white tiger. However, Chu Tianfeng glanced at Lu Qingran with some disappointment. He had been following Meng Qi all this time and could see it clearly. With just one look, the other party could tell that the little white tiger was injured and needed treatment. Wasn't it said that Lu Qingran's talent was even above Meng Qi's? She could not tell at all? No. Chu Tianfeng's tone was indifferent. The little white tiger is injured. Meng Qi picked it up and wants to treat it shooting. CCIC. Lu Qingran was a little envious. A white tiger is very rare. Junior sister is so lucky. Meng Qi glanced at Lu Qingran indifferently. She carried the little white tiger and walked towards Cool Breeze Valley. I'm going to bandage its wound. I'll leave first. Lu Qingran watched enviously as Meng Qi walked away. She sighed softly and repeated, Junior sister Meng is so lucky. She can pick up such an auspicious beast just by going out. If it was in the past, Chu Tianfeng would definitely immediately promise that he would accompany her to catch one. But now, he only felt that it was especially ear-piercing. The little white tiger is injured and might not be able to be treated. Furthermore, his gaze was slightly cold. Just a few days ago, he still felt that this girl was kind, brave, and pure, far better than Meng Qi. But now, he had already recalled everything. Those past events that made him suffer so much that he would rather die than live. When Chu Tianfeng heard the other party say such words again, he only felt extremely disappointed. His already disappointed heart became even colder. When your junior sister saw the little white tiger for the first time, she only felt that it was pitiful and wanted to save it. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. It was the first time he spoke to Lu Qingran in such a sarcastic tone. Or perhaps, she would prefer that the world be peaceful and have no illnesses, pain, injuries, or disasters. After Chu Tianfeng finished speaking, he did not care about Lu Qingran's expression and chased after Meng Qi with large strides. Chapter 10. Meng Qi took a detour through the small path and returned to her residence. She hugged the little white tiger. She did not want to meet someone like Lu Qingran, who was curious and wanted to cuddle her. She was an ordinary disciple of the Cool Breeze Valley. Her room was not big. There was a bed, a table, and a few chairs. They were all made of bamboo and looked very simple. The little white tiger scanned the room lazily. Meng Qi had already placed it on the only bed. The bamboo bed was covered with a cushion. It was neither soft nor hard. It did not look like a girl's residence. The little white tiger stretched out its claws and lay down lazily. He watched as Meng Qi took out a small tripod from her bracelet space. There were simple patterns engraved on the small tripod made of bronze. It looked rough and simple. It did not look like an important Dharma artifact. Meng Qi threw a lot of spirit herbs into the small tripod. Finally, she broke open an oar and threw it in. She drew a talisman array around the small tripod. Of course, it was impossible for medical cultivators to use firewood. High-level medical cultivators would usually find a convenient flame to use to refine medicine. Most of these kinds of flames had spirituality, and the flames that could be used to refine medicine were quite powerful. It was not something that Meng Qi could use with her current cultivation. This talisman array was also taught by her master. Meng Qi's master was a blacksmith master. Blacksmithing was even more unpopular in the 3000 worlds than medical cultivators. But if she could really reach her master's level, she could turn something rotten into something magical. Drawing a talisman array on a stone or wood and refining it slightly, it could become a powerful Dharma treasure. Meng Qi had only been with him for a short time. What she had learned was superficial. However, her master was very good to her. When the two of them met, Meng Qi was only a foundation establishment cultivator. The other party did not have any disdain or impatience. Instead, he taught her a lot. For example, he taught her how to refine a personal weapon. He studied with her enthusiastically how to use medicinal herbs as carriers on pills to carry talisman arrays and spells. Another example. The fire control talisman array that Meng Qi was using to refine medicine was very powerful. It was one of the top 10 fire control talisman arrays in the 3000 worlds. If it was used in front of a mighty figure, it could cause everything within a radius of 100 miles to be engulfed in raging flames, burning everything in the world. When Meng Qi's teacher was choosing a fire-controlling talisman array for Meng Qi, he eventually chose this Li Fire Grand Array. He spent a whole month doing everything he could. Finally, this talisman formation that could only be used by cultivators above the Yuanying stage was simplified into a talisman formation that could be used by Meng Qi, who had just formed his gold core. Of course, as her cultivation increased, the talisman array would also become more powerful. The faint flame ignited and pulled back Meng Qi's drifting thoughts. Her gaze was fixated on the flickering bright flames. In a short period of time, the medicinal fragrance had already wafted out. This was the power of a talisman array. It could reduce the time needed to refine medicine by half. Meng Qi was still in the Qi refinement stage. When her cultivation level increased, the level of the talisman array would also increase. When she was able to ascend to the Mahayana stage, she might be able to refine the medicine in one breath. Master. Meng Qi subconsciously wrote these two words on the table. She only knew that her teacher came from a hidden sect in the Western Jie. She did not know the other's name. No one in the Eastern Jie knew him. So, Meng Qi's gaze became determined. She would definitely go to the Western Jie. Regardless of the relationship between her teacher and the white-robed man in the Burning Heaven Palace Elder's spell records, she had to go to the Western Jie to see for herself. The flames of the talisman array quickly burned out. There was only a small ball of green ointment left in the little cauldron. The fragrance assailed her nostrils. Just smelling it was refreshing. Meng Qi took out the ointment and turned to walk to the bed. She bent over and gently held the little white tiger's front paw. It might hurt a bit. Her voice was very soft. She held the little white tiger's paw and blew on it. Bear with it, little Qi. The little white tiger. Who was little Qi? The fragrant ointment was stuck on his front paw, and it smelled very comfortable. It smelled good, but the moment it touched the wound, it burned. In an instant, something seemed to burrow into the wound. The little white tiger looked up at Meng Qi. A hint of surprise flashed across its blue eyes. What an ingenious idea. There was actually a healing spell attached to the ointment. His gaze flickered. He thought of the small silver medicine knife. Although it looked very crude and low-level, the talisman array on the knife was very familiar. It should not be a talisman array that a Qi refinement cultivator in the 3000 worlds could know. Even in the demon realm, only the great heaven demon royal family could know it. The ointment this time was clearly much more effective than the pill Meng Qi gave him in the canyon. Blood had been seeping out of the little white tiger's front paw. After the ointment was applied, although the wound was very painful, the bleeding seemed to have stopped. Meng Qi held the little white tiger's paw and gently raised it. It seems to be effective. She smiled at him and stuffed another pill into his mouth. Her soft fingertips brushed the white tiger's lips. A faint medicinal fragrance similar to the pill came from her cool fingers. The little white tiger's body froze again. He had never been so close to someone of the opposite sex. It should be said that no woman dared to be so close to him. But this feeling did not seem bad. The little white tiger licked its lips instinctively. The medicinal fragrance had already dissipated, but he was lying on Meng Qi's bed. That faint medicinal fragrance seemed to be everywhere. It was not strong, but it surrounded him. The small ball of ointment was quickly absorbed by the wound. The original pain on the wound, along with the burning sensation caused by the ointment, gradually subsided. No one spoke in the room. Only Meng Qi's long and calm breathing could be heard. She held the little white tiger's paw and waited patiently for the ointment to be absorbed. After half an hour, the ointment was completely absorbed. Even the last bit of medicinal fragrance entered the wound. The wound on the little white tiger's paw was gradually exposed. The wound that did not seep out blood did not look so hideous. Inside the wound, specks of silver light flickered. Before Meng Qi could be happy for too long, the light intertwined, and blood seeped out again, filling the wound. What was this? She was not surprised. If it could be cured so easily, she would not find it troublesome. This silver thing should be the culprit that caused the little white tiger to bleed non-stop. But what was this? Meng Qi gently put down the little white tiger's paw and looked up at the ceiling. Her mind quickly flashed through the various poisons she had come into contact with in her previous and current life. None of them matched this situation. Shaoshooting. Info Little Qi. Meng Qi reached out and rubbed its head. I need to go to the sect's library. Although Cool Breeze Valley was small, it was still a medical sect that had been established for more than 100 years. When the disciples returned to the sect from their training, they would record what they saw and heard on bamboo slips and submit them to the library in exchange for a certain amount of sect contribution points. All these slips could be found in the library. The elder in charge of the library was Elder Yang. He was also the teacher who admired Meng Qi the most in Cool Breeze Valley. Meng Qi left some medicine around the room that could prevent people from entering at will and turned back to stroke the little white tiger lazily. Actually, even if she did not give face to the white-robed man who looked like her teacher, Meng Qi also wanted to cure the little white tiger. It was really super nice to touch. It was cute, soft, and fluffy. Meng Qi closed the door and walked quickly to the library in the back mountain of the sect. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the warm sunset glow shone on the mountain where Cool Breeze Valley was located. At this time, it should be the busiest time in the sect after a day of cultivation. Along the way, she did not see a single fellow disciple. It was not until she reached the bottom level of the library that Meng Qi saw Elder Yang, who was guarding here, sitting cross-legged on a chair. A row of bamboo slips floated in front of Elder Yang. She did not see him move, but those bamboo slips quickly flew up. Meng Qi had seen this many times, but she still could not help but look in the direction of the bamboo slips. Cool Breeze Valley's library was not big, and the middle of the 4-story building was hollow. On both sides were tall bookshelves that stretched from the floor to the roof. Stacks of bamboo slips were stacked on top of each other. There was a spiral staircase that led up to the 3rd level of the library. There were no more stairs after that. Most of those bamboo slips were left on the 1st level and flew to one of the bookshelves to land. Only one of them flew slowly to the 3rd level and landed on one of the relatively empty bookshelves. Meng Qi. Elder Yang opened his eyes. He looked to be in his early 30s and was wearing the green robes of Cool Breeze Valley. His long hair was tied up on top of his head by a rather unique bamboo slip. Elder Yang. Meng Qi cupped his hands and bowed respectfully. I have something to ask Elder Yang for help. Elder Yang did not ask her what it was, and his gaze swept across her face. There are important guests today, and the sect master summoned all disciples to the main hall to welcome them. Why are you here? Important guests. Meng Qi froze for a moment, then reacted. Just now, Lu Qingran was waiting for Chu Tianfeng outside the mountain gate, so the people from Burning Sky Palace should have arrived. Did they come so quickly? She had just cured Chu Tianfeng not long ago. But this had nothing to do with her. In her previous life, she had been locked up in the dungeon, and she had gotten through this crisis safely. This time, she would be fine as long as she was careful. I don't know, Meng Qi answered honestly. A faint smile appeared in Elder Yang's eyes. I heard that the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace and his sect's elders are coming. Aren't you going to welcome them? The young palace master of Burning Sky Palace was famous in the East Land. He was young and handsome, and a cultivation genius. There were indeed many female cultivators who wanted to cultivate with him. With the sect master, senior sisters, and senior brothers here, it's okay if I don't go, Meng Qi answered respectfully. And indeed, no one had told her to go. What's the matter? The smile in Elder Yang's eyes deepened. There is a kind of poison. After being poisoned, there will be silver marks on the wound, causing people to bleed non-stop. Meng Qi asked respectfully, Elder, do you know about this kind of poison? Oh. Elder Yang closed his eyes. Meng Qi waited patiently. Elder Yang's cultivation was above the sect master's, especially his medical skills. He had already entered the 4th grade realm before the sect master. Meng Qi had heard about this elder in the sect. It was said that he had once vowed to travel the world and rule the world. So every year, he would leave the sect to travel outside. It was also because of this that he didn't hold any position in the sect. Other than the empty title of an elder, he would only guard the library when he stayed in the sect. Elder Yang still didn't have a personal disciple, and the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley weren't particularly keen on being his disciples. In comparison, the sect master or other elders with positions. Becoming their personal disciple was obviously much better in the eyes of the disciples. There is a kind of. Elder Yang slowly opened his eyes. I'll give you the bamboo slips. You can read and learn by yourself. As he spoke, he waved his hand. A small bamboo slip fell from the 4th floor and stopped in front of Meng Qi. Thank you, Elder. Meng Qi bowed again. She was about to ask the elder a few more questions when hurried footsteps came from outside the library. 2 disciples of Cool Breeze Valley hurried into the library. After greeting Elder Yang, they turned to look at Meng Qi. The 2 disciples' expressions were a little strange. Their eyes flashed, and they said to Meng Qi, Junior Sister Meng Qi, the sect master and the elder of Burning Sky Palace want to see you. Come with us to the main hall. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.